Meeting then, it is 7:02. Good evening. This is Andy Stack, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. I want to remind everyone that our meeting is actually being live streamed, both video and analog. So please keep that in mind. Remind everyone that the agenda and background information for tonight's meeting is available on the CA Board webpage, www.columbiaassociation.org/aboutus/leadership/board of directors. So I encourage you to follow along with these documents. The open meetings are being conducted remotely due to our emergency declaration, and since CA headquarters is closed, this meeting is being conducted remotely. I would ask everyone to please remember to mute your mics when you're not speaking. And when you do speak, please state your name so everyone knows who is speaking. And speak clearly and slowly that everyone can hear you. And of course, be courteous with each other. I will introduce each item on the agenda, and voting, except for special circumstances, will be by roll call. And I will try to remember to restate any motion before we actually take a vote. So first off, I'd just like to call the roll of the CA Board of Directors, just to get all of you officially into the minutes here. Janet?
Here.
Shari?
Here.
Jenny?
Here.
Dick?
Here.
Lynn?
Here.
Nancy?
Here.
Jess?
Here.
Alan? I know, yeah, he's there.
He joined on his phone, I think.
I saw him wave his hand. Renee?
Here.
Milton?
Here.
Andy, he's here. All right, thank you very much. The first item is to announce any closed sessions we have had, and there are two that I would like to announce. The first one was, let me get was on May 21st, 2020, a closed work session. In attendance, we had Dick, Renee, Janet, Alan, Milton, Nancy, Jess, Ginny, and Andy. The vote to close was 5-3-0. Janet, Nancy, Jess, Ginny, and Andy voted to close, and Alan, Dick, and Renee voted not to close. The meeting was closed at 4:35 p.m. It was closed under HOA sections 1 and 4, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, and other persons in connection with pending and potential litigation or other legal matters. The meeting was ended at 5:31 p.m., and the purpose was to discuss issues related to the coronavirus situation. The second one I have is there was a meeting of the Board of Directors on Monday, May 25th, 2020. In attendance were Dick, Renee, Lynn, Alan, Jess, Ginny, Shari, and then Nancy and Janet joined a little after we started. The vote to close was 8-0-0. It was unanimous. It was closed under Section 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel. The meeting was closed at 7:08 p.m. and opened at 8:10, and the purpose of the meeting was to discuss a personnel issue. So that's what I have in terms of the closed meetings. Okay, on to the approval of the agenda. I think you've all seen the agenda. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Jenny moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Lynn seconded. Any discussion?
I'm going to still
submit my objection to the way resident speak out is being handled. I don't think it works or is working.
Right, and we're going to look into that, Alan.
So I
we
hear.
got the meeting videoed, so you can now see us, and we're going to work on the resident speak out. All right.
Andy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes, sorry.
I just have a question about item B or discussion policy on e-scooters.
Yes.
Is that really the most important thing that we need to talk about right now? We are in the midst of a really critical situation. I'm hearing a lot from residents about the issues about pools and camps. And I think the discussion that we're going to have about the operating budget is really the most critical part that's going to lead into that other discussion. Is it possible for us to postpone that until a later date?
I think the board really needs to hear the e-scooter in particular because of the change in state law that affects us, to make sure we understand that.
And Andy, if I may.
Yes, Milton.
Also, and Kristen is on the call, is that we're working with other partners in the downtown area, other property owners in the downtown area, and Howard County government is waiting for those commercial property owners in the downtown area to make a decision on on moving forward if they plan to. And what we have here are some updates to our existing policies when it comes to the use of our pathways. So urgent, I wouldn't say yes, but they are time sensitive because there are other partners, other commercial property, other property owners in the downtown area who are working with us on this.
What would be the consequence of not voting on it tonight? Or is there something to vote on, or we're just hearing about it tonight? What would be the consequence if we didn't hear it tonight?
Kristen, can you add to that?
Sure. Howard County is moving ahead with a contract for a e-scooter vendor. And we don't want to be too far behind them in determining our course of action. So while they do have some desire and need to have CA's cooperation, they are, to the extent that they are able to, moving forward. And Jessica's on the line too, and she can offer some more information, but we don't want to be too far behind the county in terms of their progress in making decisions about e-scooters.
Because what would happen if we were?
Well, theoretically, the county could have scooters and our policy would not allow them on our property.
And if I may,
would that be legal, or would that be illegal?
Well, let's not get into actual discussion here on it. Milton.
To respond to Alan, one of the reasons why we want to stay pace with the other property owners in the downtown area, that being the mall, the hospital, the community college, Howard Hughes Corporation, is that given our land, our ownership in the downtown, making the assumption that those others will go forward with this, which I'm being told they will, in the discussions I had, it would be hard for us to police our pathways and our property because people are going to use our property anyway, because it's already been allowed on the other property owners that make up the downtown area. So we want to keep pace with everyone else just for the simple of providing that convenience when e-scooters are brought to the downtown area.
So are we saying that there's a deadline? Go ahead.
I would like to encourage our board members to weigh in on this, because given the discourteous nature of many of the current bicycles on the paths and their disregard for walkers, I think we should weigh in on things regarding e-scooters that may have, some guidelines for what happens when people misbehave as well. So I think this is timely. and there are more people out. And my concern is that these e-scooters are going to take over the planet, and the disregard for general people who are currently using the paths could be a big problem. So I would like to see us.
So is there still a motion on the table to approve the agenda?
Yes, so I'm going to call the question.
Can we just vote?
All those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye. Aye.
Is there any objection? All right, we'll go. Anybody abstaining? All right. I don't have any residents speak out signed up right this time. Consent agenda, the minutes are approved. We'll right to board discussion, proposed revisions of the fiscal year 21 operating budget. Want to just remind the board, we had a budget change approved April 23rd. So that's what we're operating from. And at that meeting, staff had said they would come back when there were changes that needed the board's attention. And guess what? Staff is back. There are changes that need the board's attention. I will ask Milton if he'd like to say a few things and then turn it over to Susan. Milton?
Yes, I'll be quick because I want Susan to spend the time explaining. As we stated, this is what I'm calling a proposed 3 version of revisions to the FY21 budget. And this focuses on the operating portion of it. And we're coming back because, as everyone knows, the environment that we're in the environment that we're in, especially with the closure of our facilities and other buildings and the cancellation of our programs, we are just trying to monitor and do our best projections on that income that's non-annual charge. And what we're coming back to tonight with is a reflection of how that income stream has once again changed. And this is what we want to put before the board, and also showing how we have also made reductions in our in the expense categories to reflect that change in that projections of the incomes. So, Susan, would you please get started?
I would just like to remind everyone that it's very hard to hear me if you're not muting your phone. So that would probably be a good start. Hopefully you can see a budget timeline. I'm just going to walk through that quickly just to get everybody kind of reoriented, and especially since Jessamine was not part of some of these previous conversations. So on February 20th, you approved an operating and capital budget for FY 2021. Annual charge rate, 68 cents, capped at 3.5%. We anticipated some construction coming online, new construction, especially downtown. We expected all annual charge customers to pay in full and on time. The membership revenue, we projected some sales growth. Non-dues revenue, we expected some growth in especially personal training and golf because they had such a poor year previously. Limited growth in camps and school age services. Total approved revenue then was $79.7 million. Key expense assumptions, there was a part-time position added for diversity. We changed some aquatics positions from part to full-time. Temporary funding of several external organizations. Minimum wage increase, which is regardless. Stepped up investment in cyber and other IT service provider technologies, and some significant additional consulting for the board, for president search, for compensation study, et cetera. So, and a capital budget of $15 million, which was already reduced from the 15 million being in line with the 10-year financial forecast that was provided to the board in June of 2019. So we move forward 2.5 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, March 15, all the facilities closed. March 18, we made a decision not to bill sport and fitness revenue or memberships, and not to bill school age services since the schools were closed. So we always bill on the 18th of the month for memberships, and on the 3rd for school age services. So that decision not to bill members was about $2.2 million per month. We didn't bill March 18, we didn't bill April 18, and May 18 we billed some golf members. We didn't bill the school age services. Impact was $1.1 million for the rest of the year. So at that time, we made the decision to continue to pay staff with no conditions through the April 10 pay date. So then effective March 30th, we had the senior team take a 50% pay cut, and we paid all other staff members, working or not, at 75% of their pay. That was on 4/24. So our normal payroll is about $2.4 million. That April 24 payroll was $733,000. On the 13th of April, we implemented that furlough strategy of which you're aware. And the goal of that was to keep as many team members employed and engaged with CA as possible, to maintain continued health benefits for all eligible employees, but to make the cash reductions and expense reductions that CA needed to just to be able to pay its bills. So the number of team members impacted, we saw, was 1,922. They were either laid off, furloughed 100%, furloughed 50%, or continued to work full-time at a pay of 75 or 50% of their pay. So it might interest you to know that that payroll impact then, that reduced the biweekly payroll from what it usually is of $2.4 million. It went to $733. It's at about $310,000 now for about 212 people. So it's a savings of $800,000 per pay date, and many people impacted. You know, we cut the 401k contribution in half, we deferred payroll taxes, and we dramatically reduced operating expenses, and we deferred all non-emergency capital. So on 4/23, that was the April board meeting, and that was the day before the governor announced or released his roadmap to recovery. April 23, we presented two options for the FY21 revised budget. Option A assumed an early July reopening and was more optimistic on especially sport and fitness revenues. And option B, which was essentially a Labor Day opening. The board chose the option B. It was more conservative. The key implications in that were that there would be no outdoor camps, no outdoor pools, and it extended that furlough period, which was originally projected to end in early July, through another, I forget how many payrolls, through the end of August. And so for the existing team members already on the furlough program, it extended that through the end of August, and it increased. We had to do some more staff reductions, some more layoffs, and furloughs. And we eliminated almost all of the consulting and related activities. So that's where we were, and here's where we are. So May 28th, tonight, we have, you know that the golf courses and 2 of the 3 outdoor tennis facilities opened on around May 13, or middle of May. We billed golf members about $70,000 on May 18. We're generating some decent cart rentals and green fees. Tennis is generating very little cash flow, but it requires very little staffing. So we're going to look at making some changes there that might help that situation. And at this point, based on the governor's announcements yesterday, we expect that that the governor may approve reopening gyms I would say it could be anywhere from as short as 2 weeks to 4. So we don't know, but we'll see. And then all of that is dependent, as you know, on what the county executive does, because he can, make his own decisions. So that's where we are. And let me bring up our. So I'll make this bigger because I know it's teeny tiny. This is the format that was in your packet. This shows you, this is the CA-wide presentation. We included 2009 to just give you some perspective on when was the last time we had revenue in the realm of what we're projecting now. And that was actually 2008, 2009. So we show the original approved, your February approval, $79,684,000 in revenue. We show what the proposed 2, we called it, that was approved on April 23rd. And then we're presenting some proposed changes to get to a proposed 3 scenario. And what's driving this is, so what the governor announced, and even yesterday he announced more phase 1 openings, but he hasn't gotten to phase 2 yet, and that's where the fitness clubs or the gyms are. And we just reduced. Dan's been keeping close tabs on what's going on in the industry nationwide, and the industry info coming back is as clubs reopen, they're at about 50% of their membership revenue, about 40% participation. So we felt it was necessary to further adjust down the membership revenue for fiscal year 21. The fees and rental income, those are most of the fees or a lot of the fees are personal training and lessons, leagues. USTA canceled their league program for the summer. There's a lot of things that just aren't going to happen either because of social distancing or because other folks have canceled their activities, and those are the programs that we run. Also, rentals, you can't have a group of anything more than 10, and so the rental activities really not present, not there. So that's where we came down on the revenue side. Let's see, any questions about that at this point?
I just wanted, just so I understand, you chose 2009 because of the number in terms of income, or because that was a similar crisis time because of the Great Recession?
Oh, no, because of the number.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
Yes.
Jenny, Dan's research where he's saying that when clubs do open, they're achieving 50% of the revenue. Is that because members are afraid to come back because of the regulations by the state or the county or the health department in terms of social distancing, or does he have any idea what the reason is? Or is it a combination of all the above?
Susan?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Dan is on the call.
Yeah, I know. Yep. So Dan, do you want to address that? I know that it's a combination. It's, because the capacity is significantly reduced, you can't, run as things. You have to close parts of the clubs that are, at least as far as we know. That's in those states. Everybody's doing things a little bit differently. Maryland hasn't come out with guidelines. I know Dan's participating in a county work group with the county executives team. So they're developing those. There's nothing that exists at this point.
Susan, I did have a question. This is Sherry.
Yes.
The line about the insurance increase, can you just explain that?
Yeah, so let me move on then to expenses. So those were our assumptions in the revenue sections. In order to meet at least a balanced budget or a slight positive, an increase in net assets rather than a deficit, we had to make further expense reductions, obviously, to offset another $4 million in revenue shortage, right? So we did further salary and staff reductions. Let's see. So we're continuing the senior leadership team pay cuts on a proportional level, not at 50%, but at significant cuts proportionally throughout the team through the end of December. That contributes another $123,000. So it may interest you to know that the total senior leadership team contribution in this budget is $558,000. We're also laid off or either laid off or 100% furloughed another 16 people. And then so minor change, lower credit card fees. We could talk about the annual charge. Well, let me get through my stuff, but then Jackie's going to help me. So you asked about the insurance and why it went up. Yeah, so when we did the budget for April 23, we were in the middle of insurance renewals. And I know I had provided this in some of the weekly updates that was a difficult renewal. And every single program, well, that's not true. So workers' comp didn't go up that much, excess workers' comp, but everything else went up significantly. And a lot of it just was, for the most part, beyond our control. With property, our auto experience is pristine, and still we had a double-digit increase. The total program for CA increased by 14%. And so I think that insurance carriers are taking advantage of the situation and trying to hedge what they expect to be their loss moving forward.
It went up 14%. Why is there only a 4% increase?
Well, that also includes taxes, and the taxes didn't change very much, so that's a combined item.
Susan, I'm confused by this insurance cost. My auto insurance was cut. We have Geico, and they cut our insurance costs because there are fewer cars on the road, etc. We have facilities that are not being used, so we don't have any liability there. Why are these insurance costs going up and not down?
So, it would be wonderful to be able to draw comparisons between personal coverage and commercial coverage, and that is never aligned. But as far as the usage, it's based on the number of vehicles, and we had 3 fewer vehicles, I think, this year than last year. And it's the fleet; it's the nature of the vehicles, and what has been driving that, again, it's not our record, it's what's happening industry-wide. And there were catastrophic claims for vans with multiple people in other states that just drive that stuff. So it's very frustrating. You can be almost perfect and still not impact your rates significantly.
Well, this again, as I said about banks, as we climb out of this, we might want to be taking a look at other insurance companies.
Our brokers do that for us every year.
And Susan, also in our conversation, we shared, we were expecting some type of raise this year because the cumulative effect of the past years where we had very modest increases, we had been told to expect it. They didn't tell us how much it would go up, but we knew we were going to get increase this year, more than what we had seen in past years.
We did, and they refer to something called social inflation, which is how a jury will award damages in extraordinary amounts because of the social media furor over certain incidents and claims. So, yeah. And I just really want to make that clear. So we could take this is our program is taken to the market every year. So and we're talking about a pool of a handful of carriers who write the coverage. It's not the array that we're used to on a personal side. So this budget eliminates some programs and reduces others. It reduces some open space maintenance. It reduces some art center programming, and some of that is natural from the virus crisis. The facility is still closed. It's unlikely that we will be able to have any classes bigger than 9, even when we can reopen. And it just is changing. We won't be having exhibits that people would be coming to in numbers. So a lot of that stuff's happening. Let's see. It eliminates a lot of the cyber, the extra cybersecurity. I think I told you that before. It also includes the prospect of subleasing some of our headquarters space. So that's why you see rentals going down slightly. And then so we did propose a further reduction in the annual charge share grant for the villages based on the portion of the grant that's for facility operations. I'm going to ask, or before I do that, did anyone have any other questions about any of these items?
Well, I just want to be clear that the annual, you're not projecting a decrease from the budget that we approved in annual charge. Is that correct? Revenue. That's correct. Okay, and yet you are proposing an increase or a decrease in how much we're giving to the villages of that annual charge revenue. Correct. And I know the answer is we put money all in one pot, but that's got it. Thank you. There'll be more discussion later.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, it's not a question so much, but I would really appreciate if you would remove the word grant. It's a controversial word, and it would make a lot of people a lot happier if it wasn't used along with the words annual charge share. It's a small thing, but it affects people.
I agree with that completely. It's not a grant. This is their share of the annual charge, and it should reflect that.
Yeah, it actually is a grant, and that's reported that way on their 990s. So I'll take that under advisement.
Thank you.
Could I ask Jackie if you want to talk through that methodology there? That would be helpful. And I'll bring up your exhibits.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So
well, I can't speak for everyone.
I'm sorry?
I can't speak for everyone. All I know is I can hear you.
Okay. I will assume that everyone can. So your backup material included some background information on this proposed reduction. And it starts with an explanation just of the methodology, because in the context of us looking at it all being one bucket and the 30% reduction in revenue, we need to look at everything that's going out the door, of course. So taking a step back for a quick moment, it's important to just kind of remind ourselves of the current methodology and what goes into that annual charge share. So it's meant to support two unique aspects of the Village Association's work: the core mission, I'll call that the mission share, which includes everything to support the community outreach, communications to the villages, amongst the villages, and certainly covenant responsibilities. And then there is also a credit, we call it a facility credit, to help defray some of the costs that are associated with the villages managing the buildings. And then that, in turn, was intended to allow for some free and reduced rental space for residents and other civic groups. So the portion that we are talking about is just the facility credit. And backing up again very quickly, I just wanted to say, Susan, do you mind going to, well, you don't have to yet, it's okay. So if we look at that, there's a little over, it's about 3.4 million, there you go, that we originally had in the budget as the annual charge share. Again, taking a look from the perspective of all the money going out the door, many of you that have heard the annual presentations about the villages at the board meeting know that the actual costs incurred by CA to support all aspects of the village's operations, their mission as well as managing the building, it actually ends up about doubling that because there is support for all of the benefits. There's depreciation and interest on the buildings, real estate taxes, property insurance, capital improvements, as you know, repairs and maintenance that are over certain thresholds. A significant amount of administrative support as well, administering a multiple employer 401k plan is much more difficult with 11 entities than it would be for one, the annual audit that goes along with that. The insurances that Susan talked about and all of the insurances that are paid by CA and the broker fees to manage all of that are all absorbed by CA. There's some marketing and communications. There's support from open space for the village's special events that they hold. There are a number of things, and you can see it when you look at either CA's budget, the village, the community associations page, or any of the quarterly financial reports, how the $3.3 million of annual charge share is really just one portion, and in total, the support is closer to 6.4 million. So thinking about all of that in totality, then kind of scaling back and circling back to the annual charge share and the village, the facility credit, that again is intended for operating the villages. And what we were saying is that since those villages are, or what we're proposing is that since the villages are not being operated, that we would return. I'm sorry?
The facilities in the villages.
Yes, the buildings. I'm sorry. We sometimes call those community buildings the facilities. So yes, the community buildings. Now, we would recommend a reduction that includes a portion of that facility credit. That it's called a facility credit, so that's why I keep calling it facilities, but it is the community buildings. So we also are recognizing and taking into consideration with this total proposed reduction of $159,000 that there are costs that the villages have to incur even while they're not being used for public use. There's some utility costs, there is cleaning that needs to be done, and some of those costs are going to ramp up as everybody gets closer to reopening. So that's why the $159,000 includes taking just for the months that we are saying that the villages, the community buildings aren't being used, taking 75% of that subsidy and reducing by that amount, if that makes sense. And so, keep in mind the mission share. The portion of the annual charge that goes to the mission is intended to cover all of the costs for that, all of the covenant enforcement. Of course, CA, absorbs the cost of the legal fees and a covenant administrator, but the portion that is employed and operated by the villages, as well as all of the community outreach for each village. So we don't want to touch any of that. We don't want to in any way prevent any of the villages from operating the way that they need to while the buildings are closed. But
Jackie,
yes.
Have you taken into consideration the fact that the villages are getting rental income or not getting the rental income that they expect as part of their budgets while this is all taking place? That's an important part of their revenue, and it's gone. Is that being factored in?
Yes, it is. That's a good question. So that was factored in, and the offset to that is all of those related incremental expenses that don't need to be incurred at this time. So,
okay, now, the other thing is the formula that we have used takes into consideration that rental income. And at this point, maybe it's time to re-examine the formula.
So the formula, actually, I took a close look at it. It has a lot of detail behind it. and it really breaks down the two different parts. And the piece that covers the mission of the villages is a 100% coverage, because it recognizes that there really is no significant revenue generated from, of course, covenant enforcement, special events, and community outreach. So that's why that portion of the annual charge share is meant to cover all of those expenses, the salary and benefits of the village manager, the covenant advisor, etc.
Okay, has the villages been consulted on this? My impression was that they simply got this thing in the mail and were told that their budgets were going to be cut by nearly 8.5%. Did anybody talk to the village managers to get their point of view, to find out what some of the concerns are?
No, we didn't. So it's difficult to know what to do. This is a proposed idea. I'm never sure whether to talk to them first or to share it with you first. And so at this point, no, we didn't.
Well, when this thing landed at the villages, they were not aware that this was proposed. I got a lot of emails that morning saying, what the hell is going on? And so I think we need some better communication here with the villages. And rather than just us telling them what we're going to do arbitrarily and unilaterally, it seems to me that we should have some buy-in by the villages. There should be a meeting or something to find out just how this is going to affect them.
May I jump in here? As someone who has been in the role of village,
this is Janet.
If we were doing something more than an 8.5% reduction, I could see your point, Dick, but I think that this amount of money should not be making or breaking the village's budget. I know everybody is struggling right now, but, the villages are independent organizations. And I mean, I'm curious to know why people in your village didn't contact staff to ask them about it and why they contacted you.
Because I'm their representative is the reason they contacted me. And as their representative, I'd like to know these things so when I get these calls, I can answer them intelligently. And as for whether this, I'm not quibbling over what that reduction is, 8.5%. Yeah, we're all tightening our belts, but I do think that it's important for our isn't one of our objectives, for the next 5 years to improve our relationships with the villages. And this is not the way to do it. We need to talk to them before we just lay this thing down and then vote on it a couple of days later.
Okay, Janet.
Well, I would disagree.
Jeff and then Janet. Go on, Jess.
I was just going to say I would disagree. As someone who runs a nonprofit, this kind of stuff happens. And, it is a proposal. It is not a done deal. They got the information before the board meeting, basically at the same time that we did. And we're operating in a different environment right now where there is a sense of urgency, and we don't necessarily have time to go through every particular step of, getting stakeholder input on everything. Otherwise, nothing would ever get done.
Well, if
there's an objection, I think these are more than stakeholders.
These are partners.
Okay.
I'd like to get in the queue.
Whatever.
Let's move on to Janet. Janet has been patiently waiting. Janet?
So my village understood that this was proposed and not set in stone. So that's first. Second, maybe I misread this. So does this represent an 8.56 or does it represent less than an 8.56 reduction in what is going to the villages?
So in total, if you look at the original intended FY21 annual charge share, which was the 3.4 million, if you go back just to the very beginning and then take the 8.5 reduction and now what is proposed in total, there would be about a 13% reduction to what the annual charge here to the villages.
Okay, good. Because I mean, my understanding was this is actually more beneficial to the villages than the original proposal. Because it cuts it by less. Is that accurate?
No, this is an additional amount, Janet.
Oh, so the 13% plus 8.5%?
No.
8.5 to 5.
8.5 plus to get 8.5 plus 5
to get to the 13%. What is up on my screen now shows.
Oh, I understand. Okay. So just for clarification too, I would like to point out that in Long Reach, we actually are still using 2 of our neighborhood centers for daycares for essential workers. So while, you know, I accept what CA needs to do, I'm just pointing out that we are in fact using our facilities. And, you know, to your point, we have continued to maintain them and clean them and et cetera. So just, you know, something else to keep in mind.
Okay. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet?
Yeah, I asked to be in the queue.
Alan?
And Nancy.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple things. As far as I can tell from the budget, besides the loss that we originally predicted that was about 8.5%, any additional loss we're talking about is coming from our fitness memberships, not from and other kinds of income, not from annual charge. At least that's what I understand the answer to my question was. So a couple of questions. Is it staff's position at the moment that this change is a change that CA can make unilaterally, or is this part of a management contract that would require the approval of the other parties to the management contract?
I don't think that we didn't need an amendment to the management contract for the 8.58 reduction that was approved. So I believe the answer is that it does not.
So we can arbitrarily, and I agree that arbitrarily is a harsh word, and I know you all are working very hard and trying to be rational and all that, but we can, maybe unilaterally is a better word, at any time just decide we're going to slash the amount being sent to the villages regardless of what it says in the management contract. That's what that just says to me. That's not acceptable to me. When did this idea of a facility charge reduction come up in the staff? I don't need an exact date, but when are you talking?
It came up a few weeks ago, from what I recall, when we realized a new version of the budget would need to be prepared, and every stone could not be left unturned to say, where are we going to come up with expense reductions? And I do want to reiterate that if the methodology holds true, this should allow the villages, while the majority of the buildings are not being used, to function the way that they need to during these closures. It's only meant to help CA and help the community as a whole, while hopefully that funding is not needed. And that's all,
okay.
Nothing more than that.
I hear that's the intention. I hear all good intentions, and in my field, we worry about the difference between our good intentions and our sometimes not so good impact. So I want you to know that whatever I'm saying is not because I think your intentions were bad. But I will say that I'm not sure when a few weeks ago was, and I'm not sure when we approved the last budget, but I bring up the question every single time. And by the way, Jackie, I know you're sort of on the hot seat, but I'm not directing this directly at you. I brought up the question, and I've tried to make sure every time we talk about this that the only reduction is proportional, that if we get a 8.5% reduction in our annual charge, we're going to send an 8.5% reduction proportionally to the villages. And if it's 6%, it'll only be 6%. And if it's 12%, maybe it'd have to be 12%. The fact that this is an extra piece has me feeling, and again, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying the impact, has me feeling lied to, has me feeling that this was sort of not revealed as a possibility when all those assurances were being made. And that doesn't sit well with me. And while I know that we report these things on a grant line on the 990, that's our choice to report it on the grant line in a 990. And to say that this is a grant and not the village's rightful money is a way of us taking power over the villages that I believe, and I believe others believe, is unfair. And to say we can't change that simply because that's been our practice to report it on a 990 does not sit well with me. And I know my village, and I haven't vetted the figures, but the loss that I've been told is 24,000. I don't know where that stands in relationship to our total budget. I'm done.
And Andy, may I at some point respond? Number one, Alan, and for all the board members, I'm the one that's leading these efforts when it comes to we making these modifications, because we're in a circumstance where, as I said in the memo that I sent to the board last evening, you know what our practice is. And what I'm looking at is that this is as Jackie said earlier, the cost to CA is not, when it comes to working with the villages and how CAs provide financial support to the villages, it's not just that annual charge cost. It's a bigger picture. And so when I look at what income we had to come in to pay our bills, we had to take all of it in consideration, because part of a large portion of that $6.6+ million that Jackie's talking about is cash. And so that's how we had to look at that total pot. It's not just the annual charge share. That's a cash contribution to the villages. It's a much more significant portion. And when we don't have the income to cover that, and we're looking at the entire organization, all those costs had to come into play.
Can I say one thing, Andy?
All right, then Nancy. Jackie and then Nancy.
I just want to respond to Alan very quickly and just hopefully reassure him, and you can believe me or you don't have to, that this consideration that we're presenting to you of the facility credit was not anybody's radar until we went through and had to continue extremely painfully looking at every single expense and how we were going to handle further reductions of revenue. And I looked at it, and I looked at the village share, and I looked at the methodology, and I brought it up to Susan and to Milton, and I said, there is a facility credit and the buildings are closed right now. Could there be something there that would help us to meet the bottom line and not harm the villages from doing what they need to do at this point in time until they reopen? That happened about a week and a half ago, maybe, when this whole process started. It was an aha moment. It was not on anyone else's radar. This was not swept under the rug and then brought up at the 11th hour in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Nancy.
First of all, I want to say I think you all, the CA staff, what's left of it, is doing a tremendous job. I think this is extremely difficult. It's painful on many, many levels. It's certainly painful on the village level as well. But I think that what Jackie has noticed here is the difference between the facilities and the missions is exactly on target. And I think that I know that we're still in the midst of the crisis, and until we start seeing daylight at the end, we're not going to really be able to do too much thinking and moving forward. But I think this is a good time to say that this could be a step into necessary changes moving forward, where we do divide the facility charges and the mission charges so that the villages can still continue to do what they're there to do. And CA, which owns the facilities anyway, would then take on the full responsibility of the facilities and leave the community work and the covenants and so on to the villages. That's what I wanted to say there. I just wanted to thank you guys, because I know this is tough in many different ways, but I would also like to ask you to please consider having a meeting with the village managers with or without board members. But I really would like to see that happen because, needless to say, they're all struggling as well. And it would make life a lot easier for everybody moving forward if we could work with them hand in hand as we're doing this. Thank you.
Okay, Ginny, you're up next.
I'd like to talk
and
also.
Then Shari, I'll put Shari in. And please remember, when you're not talking, mute your mic because there's feedback going on. So it's going to be Ginny followed by Shari.
Andy, can I get in there one more time?
Shari, were you in line?
And Janet.
Were you in line before me?
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. All right. Just a quick question. I think the word was proposed. We're all hearing this for the first time. The villages, the village managers, the village boards, our board, and the residents that are interested in this. So I fully expect that what the staff has in mind is a process where they will be talking with the appropriate people at the village level, the village managers, the village boards, etc. So I didn't sense that wasn't going to happen. The second thing that I'm trying to figure out, I was listening to Janet where, boy, congratulations, Longreach, that you actually are able to collect rent for 2 of your facilities and also provide some really essential service to essential workers. So that's great, and that's more income coming in. I'm trying to figure out where, are there other villages that have gotten grants, the $10,000 grants? I thought there were 4. So that money will make it a little easier, maybe not, on some of the villages. Does any of the villages have other funds, savings funds, CDs, rainy day funds, whatever, in their account that CA isn't so lucky to have, but can that be utilized as well? And I'm not hearing any of that at all. So I'm just curious as to what the pot really looks like. So anyway, that's it.
Shari, followed by Janet.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a little bit of difficulty understanding mission if we don't include renting rooms to our community for activities. Mission doesn't take place in a void, it takes place in a building. So I think that we have, in some ways I understand this as an accounting way of looking at dividing up funds, but in reality, these facilities serve the community mission, and without being able to open, the village associations have no source of income. They are in no position to be able to do anything different. CA does get the benefit of ownership, and with the benefit of ownership of the buildings comes the responsibility and the obligation to pay those charges, whether it's taxes, maintenance, whatever it is, that's part of ownership. So that's a distinction as well. To say that there will be no harm to the villages, when you go to an 8% reduction, and then you tack on another 5% reduction, and now you're at a 13% deduction. I will share with you, I just got off the phone today with someone from Representative John Sarbanes' office, and I found out why the village associations are not able to take advantage of the CARES Act. As a 501c4 organization, we are in the same bucket as super PACs. And so 501c4s were written out of the legislation. I thought there might be some way that, given our ability to operate as community benefit nonprofit organizations, we might be included in the next round of negotiations as far as the legislation is concerned. But once I heard that, that made pretty clear that that was not going to happen. So our village associations are in a very tough spot, and they employ more than just covenant advisor and village manager. There are people who are there part-time, full-time for those facilities. They live and work in Columbia. They will also be facing layoffs, unemployment. We're all in this together. We keep saying that. And I think it's really important that we understand that however we get out of this in the future, there are going to be costs associated with mitigation. All of these things have to be considered. I think that 5% is an additional amount that would be very difficult for the village associations.
Janet.
So one, I just wanted to say thank you, Jenny. But I will point out that Long Reach is, far below what its normal rental income would be for its facilities. However, Long Reach works really hard on a regular basis to ensure that their facilities are fully rented, and as such, would want zero part in Nancy's plan for CA to manage their facilities. So just putting that out there, if that's a consideration, maybe that would be beneficial for some of the villages, but please do not include Long Reach in that.
I'd like to respond to this.
I'll put you on the list. Continue, Janet. Janet?
That's it. I'm done.
All right. Jess is next, and then Nancy.
Sorry,
Jess?
gotta unmute myself. So I just wanted to share that I'm sure you guys are aware that the villages do have reserves. They have been capped, traditionally every year or two, and I can't remember what the percentage is. It's definitely less than a traditional nonprofit is allowed to keep, but they do have reserves. Now, unless they've already had to dip into reserves for a legal issue or something else, they should have a little bit of reserves to fall back on. And that's pretty standard procedure when a nonprofit falls into hard times, is you lean on those reserves. I just feel like, I think staff has done an excellent job of coming up with what feels like a very fair and logical way of calculating this amount of money. And I say this as someone who worked as a village manager for 5 years. This makes sense to me. It seems fair. It's not biased. It's not arbitrary. And honestly, my village has already laid off people because if there's no facility and they can't rent the facility, then the expenses go down significantly. And yes, salaries are always the largest expense, but the reality is, this is the reality we live in. And I think it is not worth arguing over $100 and something thousand in the grand scheme of a $3 to $6 million assessment share. I mean, I think I really do believe that if the village managers, I want to give them some credit that they know how to run their businesses and that they can make this work. And it's from what I recall, based on my experience, most villages are only earning somewhere between 30 and 40% of their income through rentals, with the exception of Long Reach. So I really think that it's not, I don't think it's useful to get into a philosophical argument about the funding of the villages when we're dealing with an urgent situation where the CA is dealing with cash flow, where I think this proposal is very fair and logical. And I truly feel like, if the village managers are struggling with it, they should call CA staff and talk to them about their specific situation, because they are partners and because we work together. So that's just my 2 cents.
Andy, may I get into on
Sure.
the list?
Yep, right after
And me
Nancy.
as well, please.
Nancy, and then Milton, and then Alan.
I just wanted to say that I never said that the rentals of the facilities would not go to the villages. And I only made a broad statement about how the facilities and the missions of the villages could be separated. But I really never said that the villages should not be making money from their rentals. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Milton, and then Alan.
I just would like everyone to please consider, but for the crisis that we are dealing with, first the pandemic and now the economic crisis that we're in, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If the board members, as we stated earlier, go back to the budget you approved in February, it was a budget that had almost $80 million in income, higher than the previous years. So we were looking for a very good FY 2021. That has been taken out from us. And right now we're planning basically, and not trying to be dramatic, we're planning day by day how to get through this. What we're looking at here, and I've shared this with the board, this is the last time I'm hoping that I have to come to you with a revised budget for FY 2021, because this is the third time. Moving forward, we will continue manage it just like we do our on a monthly basis. But we need to get to the point where we have to be comfortable with it to go forward, because the numbers keep changing on us so fast. But as I said, please don't lose sight but for this crisis, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and all the dollars of the village share will be going to them. But right now, I'm just trying to make sure that we look at what we can pay. That $159,000 is cash we would have to put out. It's not something that we can defer. It's something we would have to put out, and that means that we will have to look at other places and CA to cover that $159,000.
Alan?
Okay, I guess this wasn't what I was going to say, but Milton, you having just said that, I want to give you a chance to. I'm not clear what has happened that had you think you needed to remind us that this is because of the crisis.
Well, Alan, I stated that because basically I'm looking at the entirety of the organization. As I said earlier, I have one bucket of money of income to pay all the costs that CA are committed to, and the costs and the dollars that we share with the villages are part of that cost. It's an expense category to us, and I had to look at that. And as I said, but for this crisis, I would not be looking at that portion of those costs or any other costs. As I said, we reduced our personnel related costs over 37% from the original budget. So we are looking at the entire organization.
Okay, I guess I understand. I won't dwell on that. But I will say that I don't see the amount we send to the villages as a cost CA is committed to. I see it as money that is the villages that we hold on to, and we are the pass through. Okay. And to me, that's I think I have the floor. And to me, that's a very different thing than a cost we're committed to.
We're going to have to agree to disagree, Alan.
We've done that many times over the last several years.
Yes.
I will say, Jackie, I fully accept what you said. I have no problem accepting that. My preference, though, if this is such a great idea and works, is that rather than us approving it, that we approve the kind of discussions that people have talked about to say, okay, let's have a sit down with village officials, with CA officials, and say, here's the situation. Here's what, we believe, because I'm hearing the arguments, and I understood the arguments before we started this meeting, that facilities aren't being used, so facility costs aren't there. That all is reasonable. What's not reasonable to me is making this a unilateral move. So if we can make the case to the villages to say, you've got facilities of ours that you're not using, therefore there are costs that are not associated. Can we come to an agreement, a modification of the management contract for this year? I could be behind it for the reasons that Jackie, you went through and that have been given. Doing it unilaterally, right now, I can't get behind.
Okay, can we move on?
Andy, I'd like to just make one quick comment.
One quick one, because we have other things here we want to talk about.
Okay. I just want to say, yes, I recognize that the staff has done an incredible job here. This is a very complex subject. We got some moving targets, some very, very, very difficult decisions that have to be made. And I think we've really benefit from a terrific staff on this. My concern is simply that we're having some communications difficulties that I think need to be addressed. And the second thing is some of these things, such as working with our partners, which are the villages, which are in the same business we're in, and helping us as we help them. We really need to talk with them and consult with them and let them know what we're doing, because they're receptive. They understand the problem. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They have agreed to take the money monthly rather than quarterly. They're working with us, but we just can't dump stuff on them without bringing them into the conversation.
Okay, Susan, you had sent out some additional information that gave a little bit finer overview. So I think it would be good if you might present that so everybody can kind of get a sense of how it affects each division.
Right.
Or each department within CA, sorry.
Yeah. So Renee had asked for that this morning, and it was not, it wasn't ready. We got it, it was a little after 6 when we got this ready to share. So I'll start with, well, let's see. So this is the sport and fitness page. This should look familiar, a little bit more familiar as far as format goes. And I'm very sorry for the tininess. We'll blow it up a little bit. So the CAY presentation, that I showed earlier, now this is the departmental presentation, and it's this FY21 COVID budget column. You see it in 2 places. So it gives you a perspective, and you all got an email of this information, so you can look at them more closely later. But this shows you where we were in 2019. Well, actuals for 3 fiscal years, where we think we'll be for FY 2020 for the year. As you know, with a year, we're still closing the books for fiscal year 2020. So that'll be available in July at the audit committee meeting and possibly a little earlier. And here is the budget. So you can see the impact on sport and fitness compared to where we thought we would be with the fiscal year 20 is 10,718,000 less in revenue over here compared to the FY20 budget, because we lost the last 6 weeks of FY20. It's actually $16 million less than budgeted. So, we're showing over a 55% reduction in sport and fitness revenue for this fiscal year period. You can see that we, the expenses, some of these expenses are fixed. You can't do really anything about depreciation. You can't do anything about interest. We just talked about insurance. We have no control over insurance and taxes. You see utilities are down significantly because the buildings aren't being used. So that's a 26% reduction over budget just in utilities alone, which if you think about that facility credit number, it was far lower for that. Let's see. But the bulk of the savings that we would experience would be in personnel costs. So that's what sport and fitness looks like.
Okay.
So can we talk about sport and fitness before we go anywhere else?
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand that right now you're estimating under, I guess, the last COVID column,
Same.
A loss of 10.2 million from sports and fitness? Okay. All right. So, okay, let me just leave it right there. I just want to make sure I understand.
Right. Because, you see there are almost $6.4 million in depreciation that, we can't do anything
Right.
about. 800,000 in interest, rent, $1.2 million, utilities. There's a lot of fixed costs here because of all of the buildings that we're operating.
Right. But that still gives us a negative cash flow because the depreciation
for
is
sports fitness, yes,
of $4 million,
right,
give or take.
right. That's true for sport and fitness, right?
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to next one.
Community services. Let me see if I can make this a little larger for you. So community services is different. It doesn't have all of those buildings. You see depreciation is tiny, $219,000. So originally we thought we would end the year at 4 million. Well, we think we are going to be 4,537,000 in revenue for community services. We've reduced that significantly in the budget because the school age services reductions and camps and the little bit of money that comes from the art center. And again, you see that, so there's depending on whether you compare to the 20 estimate, 2,052,000 less revenue or 2,429,000 compared to the budget. We'll stick with the budget comparison here. And then again, most of the savings is in personnel because that is clearly a service function operation. And then also there's significant savings in the temporary funding and grants of almost $1 million, $956,000.
Susan, not directly related to this. Earlier you gave us a figure of 1,000 to 1,700, whatever it was, of numbers of employees who are affected in some way, either being furloughed or. Isn't that everybody who's affected in some way? Either their salary's been cut, or they're furloughed, or they're something. Yeah. Or they're employees who are fully employed.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to be.
So may I ask a question about this budget before we move on?
Sure.
So under community services, what are you estimating to be the tuition and enrollment? What is that going to be for?
School age next year. School age services starting in the fall. It's half of what it normally is.
Right. But have you looked at the guidelines?
Yes, carefully. Mm-hmm.
And are we going to be able to operate those programs in the school if they're doing on and off day?
Well, we think so, and it will be. It's not going to be the same. So we had originally budgeted $4 million, and we're at $2,385,000.
Right.
To reflect that on and off day thing, and also we've been working with the school system. We have a great relationship and interaction with the school system. It's 1,500 kids a day that need this care, so there's going to be some way to try to.
Right. I'm not disagreeing with that. I guess my question is, so what is the group size, the maximum group size you can have for school age?
If it's right now, it's 10.
It's 10. That's my question. So at 10 in the cafeteria, because you have to be in a closed classroom, I'm not sure how. Is that why we don't make money?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
In other words, if you can only have 10 kids in a room for before and after school care, do we lose money or make money at 10 kids?
It depends on how many groups we can run. So,
I thought under the rules they said each room could have one group of 10, but in a closed, you could have several closed classrooms with multiple groups of 10. So I'm just trying to figure out how you're getting to this number, and that's all. I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, so I can get the details for you from this, but we're working hand in hand with the school system, and they want us in these programs. So I can find out specifically if you really need that. I would hate to dig into it if we don't, but
well, there's no point in digging into it because we're not sure what the school system is going to do.
That's my point, right? That's why I wouldn't spend a lot of time going further than this. at this point.
Andy, if I can ask a question.
Okay, Shari?
Yeah, so my understanding from the past, and I do have to say past because we're in a whole new world,
Right.
is that before and after school care does bring in cash flow, that it is a revenue positive, and that traditionally camps also are revenue positive, that they are bringing money to CA.
So revenue positive doesn't mean anything. So the camps bring in revenue and school age services bring in revenue. School age services has a significant increase in net assets, significant bottom line, because its revenue exceeds its expenses in a significant way every year. Camps does not. CA loses money on camps every year.
So can you go ahead, Shari? Are you finished? That I'm confused.
All right, because I had gotten some information from another staff member that seemed to be different. So maybe I'll have to take a look at that in order to understand it.
Look at the budget for FY21 and has actual 3 years of actual stages 86 and 87.
Right. But it's are you saying that because it's under community services, you're not showing the positive cash flow?
No,
because
there's no, this is it.
Okay, so, but on.
This is Lynn. If I could just clarify, Renee, what this community service page you're looking at is a roll up.
Yes. That's what I was asking. Thank you.
Services divisions.
Thank you.
Yep, it's the entire division. I mean, it's everything that's under community services. School age services is only a small part of it.
All right, so then let me ask the follow-up question to that. So then if I look at the last budget column request, is there anything rolled up into that other than before and after school care? Or is that multiple programs?
I think it's very little. Lynn, do you have a sense of how much is not before and after school care? It's hardly anything.
Right. So, okay. Thank you. That's all. I'm just trying to figure out.
Are you talking about the revenue or the expenses? I got disconnected.
The revenue. The revenue.
Expenses.
Revenue.
Yeah, this is the total department, community services, all of its activities in here. And the majority of this, far and away, is school age services revenue.
Thank you. Okay, open space.
Oh, sorry. Okay, open space. So this is the entire department again. So this includes all of the turf maintenance, watershed, open space maintenance, landscape services, the construction department, the piece that's not capital, et cetera. The dog park operations, everything's in here. So their revenue is usually as grant revenue. And so they were not, they were budgeting less than they've gotten in the past anyway, and we're dropping that by $385. It's also some rental income. You see a little less for events and things that we don't expect to happen. So again, you see the bulk of the reductions in personnel costs. There's no, we're actually showing an increase over the FY20 budget in fees. It's less than what we spent last year, but it's still more than what was budgeted. And again, they have a significant depreciation component because all of those open space amenities like pathways, footbridges, the tennis courts and the basketball courts and the lake, dredging projects, dams, et cetera, are depreciated. So that's a significant component. We're showing it to be less because we're going to push off a lot of that capital that doesn't need to be done. We had a lot of extra maintenance in there that we're going to hold off on. So they, whereas in the past they average a deficit or decrease in net assets of about $14 million a year, budgeted to be at 15. We're saying it's about 13. There's really not we held the line on this one. We didn't reduce it as much as certainly on a percentage basis as these other departments, because we still have to mow grass, we still have to do storm cleanup and snow removal and all that stuff. So not a big hit really to this department. Any questions on this one?
Marketing?
Okay, communications and marketing. Revenue here, I forget what that is. I think it's late fees, credit card fees. Yeah, pretty much late payment fees. It's not a significant deal. Well, I guess it is on a percentage basis because fewer transactions. Again, the significant reduction is in personnel. This you'll see here $525,000 reduction in marketing campaigns, materials. Certainly not as many. We're not having dog day or kids day, so the materials for those or supplies for those events we took out of the budget. And this collection and treasury expenses. This is our cost. These are mainly our credit card fees. You know, what we pay to the credit card companies to use them for membership and school age transactions, and that's a significant amount of money, but because there are fewer transactions, that amount would go down. Fees, that's a temporary staffing, and some more trying to do some, digital, the communications that we've been doing through this period. You see a lot of email communications, video, social media input, and these are allocated dollars. So just, this is kind of, we didn't do the allocation here, but so you can see the total. That's a little difficult to understand. Sorry about that. But over here you can see their total expenses, $3,715,000. We're budgeting $3,202,000. And again, the reductions are on the personnel side and supplies, operating supplies, materials, and marketing placement. Any questions about that one?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Sharon.
Have we eliminated print materials for, let's say, the next 6 months or so until we know what things are going to look at? We always have a lot of print material that goes out before the schools open and things of that kind. Can we, in effect, call a moratorium on that and just be using social media?
So we've mostly done that anyway. We communicate with the school age parents and with via email. We're doing we're not going to do an activities guide in print. We've cut that. We had already reduced that significantly. You probably weren't aware of that, but we did a digital annual report last year. I think we're going to do a very brief annual report too this year in paper, but that's about it. It's already been cut significantly.
Hey, Susan?
Yes, sir.
Just also, I don't know whether it's dollar for dollar, but in response to Shari, we are doing more signage because of COVID-19 and reopening our facilities and those plans. So I don't know whether it's going to be dollar for dollar when it comes to print, but we are doing more signage than we would normally do.
That's a really good point. That's a lot. There's a lot of signage being generated. That's true. And even for the open space with the tot lots and all that stuff, lots of signage. Right.
Yeah, sure. I really do understand the necessity of that. We've got to keep people aware as we change rules and things of that kind, what has to be done. So I was thinking more of the advertising campaigns and such. I think those may just have to go by the wayside, but thank you.
Yeah, they had mostly already. Okay, any other questions?
Quick question. Just the next to last line, total operating expenses minus P. What does minus P mean?
I don't know. Let's see. It's on all of them. I don't know. We'll get rid of the minus P. It doesn't mean it.
Okay.
President's office. So let's see, I don't need to show you this. So President's office includes the actual Office of the President, internal audit, general counsel, planning and community affairs. So that's the sum of that is in this spreadsheet here. So those in the past, those expenses have ranged, been about an average, say, $2.2 million. We expect them to be $1,965,000 for this year. We're budgeting $1,999,000. You see the reduction in the personnel costs, mainly through pay cuts in that area, and the increase where you do see that is for the fees that we kept in the budget, for the potential search for a CEO, president CEO, and also consulting related to the board's the update of the general plan, our participation with Howard County in that process as well. So those fees stayed in there. Any questions about that? Administrative services. So this is everybody's favorite, and it's accounting, finance, treasury, IT, HR, and purchasing. It also is where the annual charge revenue is reflected and where any investment earnings, interest earnings is another income for the organization. So you already know that we reduced you expect a bigger number here because you're used to seeing this compared to the FY21 budget. This is compared to the FY20 budget, so the variance is smaller, or to the FY20 actual, so the variance is smaller. So that's just different basis for comparison here. You'll see significant reductions in personnel costs. The employee benefits number is big here because we didn't take the time to flow through all of the benefits reductions to every single page in every single cost center. We threw a bigger adjustment here rather than take the time to go person by person through each department. So, and then this is also, I think, yeah. So anyway, that's what that is. That's why it looks so big. You see reductions in fees. So we had multi-factor authentication in here. We had other IT consulting. I had senior, like executive level IT consulting, outsourced CISO, a bunch of things that are not in here. Let's see. Oh, we had a compensation study. It's been a long time. We supposed to do those like every 5 years. It's been 8, I think, and that was in here. We took that out. Let's see.
Wasn't there a compensation study done since I've been on the board, which is within the last 6 years?
I think there might have been a benefit study done right,
yes,
but not a whole compensation study.
Yeah, we
Okay.
See what else. So that's that. Any questions? Any other questions about this?
Is this the last sheet, or do you have more to go?
You're so lucky. Here's another one. This is the board of directors page. Let's see. We just we really left that pretty much alone. We took out I think stakeholders dinners and left your consulting fees, for your zoning expert and things like that.
Do you have in there that I volunteered to cut my salary in half?
Yes, that's the one right here.
Okay.
And the last one, the villages.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
We had been getting a $500 gift card. Is that been taken out?
No.
Shouldn't it be?
Absolutely.
I don't think, I mean, everybody's making sacrifices.
Right.
I don't think the board should get those cards.
Yeah.
But does that really cost anything if it's all CA?
It doesn't.
It doesn't, but what does it say to the community if we're not taking a reduction.
Well, it actually does cost. I mean, if you wanted to buy the things that you're buying with that gift card, then you would pay otherwise. So.
Right.
Yeah, I know my wife uses it for the
Haven.
for a couple of services. So yeah, I think we can do without it.
Well, okay, I would probably need a vote on that. Well, actually, what I would prefer that you do is just turn it back when you get the letter or you've gotten the letter. Just tell us you're not going to use it, okay? And we'll take it out.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would just point out that it may be a small statement, but that doesn't make the same statement as the board, as a body, choosing not to have that. I know it's a small amount of money.
So, but we're going to vote on this stuff in a few minutes, right?
I don't know what.
Yeah. Let's let Susan finish here.
Here's the last page. This is the village page. You see some red in the income. That's just the gain or loss on fixed asset disposal. So that's related to the capital spending and just adjust as projects are either delayed or not. So that's doesn't factor into how much money the villages receive. Fees, we did reduce the legal fees a little because the courts are not even open, so we can't actively enforce some of those things anyway. And we've really reduced that caseload, and Deb Bach's done an amazing job with that. So, and then it shows you this will be the difference between the FY20. And again, these numbers aren't the same as what you've been seeing because we're not comparing to the same thing. This is compared to the FY20 budget or the FY20 estimate.
But wait a minute, where's the? So that's why it's 10.8%, not 13.5%.
That's correct.
And the total dollar amount of the proposed additional reduction to the villages is $359,000, because I've been hearing $100,000, $150,000.
No, see again, that's not the same comparison. This is 21 budget to 20 budget. So we were looking on previous pages, 21 budget to the previous 21 budget. So.
Well, so what numbers? Where should I? Which two numbers should I compare in to see what the actual dollar loss to all villages will be additional in this budget from the one we approved? Is that the 289?
No, I'll show you. That's the other spreadsheet. So this is what this COVID estimate 2020. This is what the villages received in 2020. This is what the new budget is being proposed. So this was what was budgeted. This is what we're proposing for fiscal year 20. For fiscal year 20.
So it'll be about a third of that 289. Is that what we're looking at then?
Alan, are you talking about the additional 5% that was talked
yes.
tonight? That totals $159,000.
Okay, $159,000. So it's interesting because my village estimated that our loss would be $24,000, which is way over a tenth of $159,000. So, but I won't get into that. And have we seen, and if we have, I apologize, but how much are we proposing the CA's net assets increase with this new revised budget?
You have $35,000. That's what we started with in the beginning of the presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
And that was provided in advance.
Yeah. It's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Susan? Anything else?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Over the last 2 years, we've spent, give or take, about $1 million per year on natural disasters. And is that planned into this budget?
So I think it's got to be pretty darn close because we didn't reduce. We actually the reduction for open space is not that significant. So I can find out whether it's $1 million or not. And I'm not sure the $1 million was that.
That was the 2 hurricanes that kind of One was like I think 1 year was like 800 and some thousand, and the other year was just over $1 million. So it averages about $1 million. That's not an exact figure.
Yeah, we didn't reduce that dramatically because we know that those events are out of our control. So I don't know if it's $1 million anymore, but it's not 500,000. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Susan? All right, then I'd like to just kind of move on to the e-scooter policy. And we'll come back to the budget. Don't worry. Milton, is there anything you want to say on the e-scooter policy?
No, Jessica and Kristen are going to lead the discussion on this.
Kristen, Jessica, thank you.
Hi. Good evening. It's Jessica here. Pleasure to see everyone's faces and hear your voices again after a while. Thank you for taking time tonight to go over this. I know it's not the most pressing issue on your agenda. I'm going to quickly summarize the memo that was sent to you last week. There are essentially two policy issues that are relevant for discussion related to e-scooters. The first one has to do with the change in state legislature for how the state transportation code classifies e-scooters. And then the second question is more localized to the operation of a e-scooter sharing company coming into Columbia. I think it's best to, based on your earlier discussion, to separate these issues because they have different topics of discussions and different areas of concern. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is just a brief recap that as of January 1st this year, e-scooters, which are electronic low-speed scooters, the kind you've seen in Baltimore and in Washington, D.C., have been reclassified as bicycles. What that means is that anywhere in the state, and then as it's applied through the county's regulations, where bicycles are permitted to operate, e-scooters are now permitted to operate. In Howard County, what that means is that e-scooters are allowed to operate in the roadways, on sidewalks, on pathways, and anywhere that bicycles were previously allowed to operate. A quick note is that change in the code is applicable to the public right-of-way. So it's not requiring private entities like CA to allow e-scooters to operate as bicycles. However, because Columbia Association operates a pathway system that is pervasive throughout Columbia and it connects into the county's transportation network almost seamlessly, it makes sense from staff's recommendation perspective to discuss this and consider the adjustment of our own policies. Up until now, we have always maintained that we do not allow electronic motorized vehicles to operate on the pathway system. That's because, as you're all aware, not all of our pathways were designed to the current standards that a lot of pathways are currently designed to. We have steep slopes, we have narrow pathways, we have areas where we're not quite sure that they would be safely able to operate. The exception that we do have for motorized vehicles operating is personal mobility devices that are needed for disabled visitors to our system, and electronic bicycles. And because we allow electronic bicycles, and the state now, in their own view, considers e-scooters to be the same kind of vehicle, it seemed pertinent for us to discuss that. And so if, depending on how the board would like to operate, I can move on to the second issue of the e-scooter sharing issue, or we can discuss essentially just how we want to handle our open space policy for e-scooters on CA Pathway, regardless of who has them.
Jessica, I would like just a little discussion on, I'll say the safety issue. It came up earlier, and it's, in theory, these scooters sound fine. It's just, I know there have been so many problems in, Washington, Baltimore. I mean, people just, they go on these things, they run people down, they knock them over. Any thoughts, any words on
Yeah, honestly, it's the same challenges we face with any of our systems. You know, we have bicycle users who use our pathways. We have longboarders who use our pathways. And quite frankly, we already see the e-scooters out on our pathways. We've already had some issues with them. You know, anytime you have pedestrians interacting with anyone who's moving at a speed higher than a pedestrian, there's potential for conflict. How we've handled this in the past is that we have tried to encourage the use of those vehicles only on the pathways that are very wide, so wider than 10 feet, and that are more flat and not as crowded. For instance, we don't allow bicyclists to operate near the fountain because there's too many pedestrians for that to safely occur. The real difficulty is the enforcement aspect. You know, you can post signs as best you can, but it's just not feasible to monitor and manage, you know, every single person who's on our pathways. So it's really about moving forward with the design improvements to our own pathways over time to make them more aligned. And then also to continue to emphasize and educate our users about safety requirements. A lot of what you can do and a lot of what a lot of communities are doing who have side paths, who have all these type of users on them, is you start putting in kind of interior right-of-way directions. So essentially you try to separate pedestrians from other users and try to say, you know, pedestrians to the right or left, e-bikes and bicyclists to the left. On pathways like our lakefront, it might make sense to do that and to do it directionally. And by doing that, you're going to limit the amount of conflict that might happen. So it's really about evaluating our own system to see where it's safe to introduce these. One of the considerations staff did when we prepared the memo for you and the recommendation to alter our policy is that the pathways are a more separate instance kind of facility. Once you get into our pathway system, it's very clear you're on CA pathway system. But we also own a lot of sidewalk. We own a lot of land that has other people's pathways going on it. And so our broad policy, as it's applied right now, I think creates a lot of confusion for residents in Columbia who might have their own personal scooters or who might in the future use a commercial sharing system to know where they can and can't operate and whether they're operating on a public right-of-way or whether they've entered CA property. And so mostly we're thinking about this from a clarity perspective of how we address our policy for those non-pathway systems. And then we might want to consider separating policies if we find that there are areas in our pathway where it's just frankly unsafe to have these vehicles.
Janet, do you have any questions? Because I know you had raised this.
Yeah, I mean, so my concern is more sort of the enforcement of bad behavior, and you know, I mean, honestly, I'd like to see a GoPro on every scooter, and when there's an incident, you know, whoever's in charge of that account gets banned. But I don't see that happening because that seems like an expensive prospect. But I am concerned because I mean, especially since the gyms have been closed, there's such a large increase of traffic on the pathways. I've had lots of bikes go by way too fast. And I think the challenge with scooters is sometimes worse because you may have people riding them that are not really that familiar with them. And I've seen, you know, throughout Baltimore, I've seen a lot of people like going nutsoid on scooters because they don't really know what they're doing. I've also seen people like carrying extension ladders on their back while riding a scooter. So, you know, like, I just don't know. I don't know. I have no solutions. I'm just very concerned that there at least be something in the policies to talk about enforcement. And in the event that someone gets caught, like on phone or whatever, you know, is there identifying information on the scooter if they crash into somebody so that they can be reported, that kind of thing. You know, just some recourse in the event that they run somebody over. Because, you know, the pedestrian's going to get the brunt of that, I suspect.
Janet, one thing that we can rely on, and we've built that relationship with Howard County Police Department, they have a large presence on our pathway, whether on bikes or with those multiple seat electric golf carts. And with this being introduced, we just have to continue working with them because really, I don't want our staff to try to get into enforcement.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you, Milton, and that's exactly where I'm headed with this, and that is when they're establishing these policies, this stuff needs to be thought about up front and not as an afterthought. That's my main concern. Thanks.
Yeah,
I'd like to get in here.
Yeah, I'd like to get in.
Okay.
I'd like to get in as well.
All right, I got Shari and Alan. Who else?
It's me, Dick.
And Dick. And Nancy.
And Nancy. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Shari, Alan, Dick, and Nancy.
Okay,
Shari,
thanks.
you're on.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I share some of Janet's concerns because I've also witnessed some really goofy behavior, especially recently. And so I was wondering, I'm not that familiar. Is there some way that you can get some kind of signaling? For example, I mean, the folks that are the bike riders that are going fast say on your left, and they let you know that they're coming by. I think one of the issues with the scooters is that there's no way they're on top of you before you know that they're there. So that's one concern. I share the concern about about people operating these on the narrower paths where there's a lot of ruts in the pathway, and what happens if somebody, for example, goes over a rut on our pathway and takes a bad spill? What is our potential liability if it's on our property? So I think the liability issue is something that probably needs to be ironed out, or we need to get some more information about that. And I guess the other thing is with the dog park, I believe, don't you have to register your dog in order to use the park, or don't you need? I know Dennis said that they'll be opening up the dog park and it will be by appointment. So there's some way of tracking people. That would at least give us some way of knowing what's up and who's who, and whether they're a Columbia resident, whether they're a Howard County resident, because I can also see that many people will come out here who are not from this area because the paths are so attractive.
Jessica, if I may, please talk about the geo-tracking devices that will be on these scooters.
Milton, if it's okay, I'd like to separate that into the Escooter commercial company because it's a little bit different than the issues that we're discussing right now, where part of the policy discussion we're having right now is essentially what happens now that these e-scooters are becoming actually pretty inexpensive when every child ends up with one under the Christmas tree and adults start using them and they're really personal vehicles. And so I'm taking notes as you bring up your concerns, and I'd like to address them once they've all been voiced, if that works for the group.
Okay, Alan, you're next, and then Dick and Nancy.
Yeah, and that's fine with me. And my question mostly had to do with the commercial, but I was wondering two things. One is, and I know it's a moving target, you can't tell, do you have a sense of, in the short term at least, what percent of scooters are going to be commercial and what percent are going to be privately owned? Let's start there. Or is that anybody's crapshoot guess?
I can answer that directly right now. Once we get into the commercial discussion, there is a limit to the number of vehicles that are permitted to operate in Howard County. So there will be a limit to the number of commercial vehicles that are on the streets at any given time.
And what do we think the ratio between the two is going to be, between private ownership and commercial ownership?
It's very difficult to say. I can try to look at some national averages that we're seeing, see if anyone's been monitoring that. It's very difficult to see what the private option would be.
I'm just trying to figure out which is the bigger issue to focus on, or is it just we focus on both? So, and lastly, because I do have a question about the commercial, which I'll hold. I was wondering if anybody from the staff wanted to respond to Shari's question about liability. Somebody has an accident in a electric scooter on our path. Are we liable?
Is Sherry on tonight? If she's not,
yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Her.
So,
I think it's one of those areas of the law that is all relatively new, has really not been solidified. but to the extent that it is possible in working on the contract that we would be entering into with the commercial scooter provider, we would be transferring as much of the risk of liability to them as possible.
Yeah, but I think we're talking about Billy or Sally on their privately owned scooter at this point.
Right, right.
And the answer to that is, we've talked about this before. Anybody can always sue for any reason. Whether a court would ultimately hold us liable is a different question. It would depend upon whether the scooter rider can somehow show that it was our negligence that caused their injury. And
well, but does this mean we need to? Do we need to now maintain our paths to a different standard? Because if I'm walking along and I see a 3-inch stick across the path, I can step over it. If I'm on a scooter, then I crash.
Since scooters are now classified as bicycles under Maryland law, the answer to that is no. We do not change our maintenance standards. We would continue to maintain our pathways in the same way that we always have, because we allow bicycle pathways. And we have signs in various locations indicating that our pathways, all of our pathways, are not necessarily safe for bicycles or now scooters. So,
okay, thank you.
Just kind of proceed at your own risk. So.
Andy, can I get on the list, please?
Sure. Dick and Nancy, and then Ginny.
I would just like to say, whoever runs this scooter company has one hell of a lobbyist. I can't believe that they've been reclassified as bicycles. I am very concerned about any motorized vehicles on our pathways. I think things like wheelchairs, that's one thing, but I haven't had too many problems with bicyclists. I do a lot of walking on those pathways, and bicycles are usually pretty conscientious. But these people on scooters, I've been down in Washington, D.C., and they're nuts. And they just, they're totally irresponsible. I'm really concerned about what's going to be happening on our pathways. And I'm just wondering, are there any things that we can do, like making sure people have helmets? Can we put in speed cameras? Can we issue CA licenses to use them? I don't know what the answers are. I think the liability question is a big one. As Alan said, there's a stick on the road. Is that our responsibility? Some juries would say it is. So I'm saying maybe, you're at your own risk signs, but this is going to be a mess. This is really going to be a mess. And I think whoever at the state level, county level approved it is really is really creating problems.
Nancy.
I think, first of all, I've got a couple of parts to this. It sounded like Sherry said that CA is bringing in a scooter company. Is that right?
No, that's not what that's really not what I said. There's a scooter company that is going to be providing scooters for use on county pathways. And the county has told them that to the extent that they want to be able to have their scooters operate on privately owned pathways, they will have to enter into separate agreements with those owners. CA, of course, is a very large private owner of pathways. And so they approached us, and we have been discussing the ins and outs of a potential contract. Obviously, we have not yet come to any agreement on terms.
Okay, so in essence, CA, it does have to come up with an agreement in order for this scooter company to function on our pathways. Yes or no? Just okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that another couple of other good points were made. I think that registering them and having them have a license or something recognizable on it, where somebody run off the pathway or something happens and people want to report it, I think is a very reasonable request. They say they're low speed. I don't know what low speed means. My house backs right up to a pathway with a lot of activity on it. And I have never once seen a Howard County police officer on our pathway, just as an aside. I'm sure that on the wider pathways or around the lakes that are more heavily used, they probably spend more time there. But I do have serious concerns about this. And I think our liability is also a big concern.
Ginny, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Ginny?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm fine. Okay, just a couple of quick things. One, I assume what's happening is our staff, CA staff, and the county staff are working together so that there's some set of safety guidelines that they will require any companies that are going to be selling or renting these scooters will abide by. So that's correct?
Yes, and I can go into more detail later.
Yeah, okay, that's one of the guarantees. Two, I would hope that there's some way, if we go ahead with this, that we get some sort of a fee for allowing the companies for allowing us to open up our pathway system to these companies. It could be a little bit of a moneymaker anyway, if we do this. Three, I think the main objective here, as I understand your document, is to provide the ability of people to get around downtown, both bikes. Bikes are currently being rented downtown and in other locations, or to get from downtown perhaps out to the villages and then to Gateway eventually. So whatever the liability is for the bike companies that are renting, I assume would be the same liability for scooters. But the idea is transportation and ability to get around for both bikes, scooters, and frankly, I would like a circulator bus eventually so that people don't need to bring their cars downtown. And we have to remember there'll be a lot of hotels downtown. People will be coming in from other areas and want another way of getting around downtown other than renting a car to just drive around. I assume there may be some path systems with the mall. This may be something that would be very big for the mall. And the last thing that somebody was talking about may have some potential in terms of how we look at our path systems. Perhaps, and this I know would be expensive and it may not even be a good idea, perhaps a line down the middle that says, right side walking, etc., left side passing lane. But that is being violated when you have 6 people walking across and the poor bike is even trying to get past, yelling on your left, and they don't even move. So that's about it.
And everybody's trying to do social distancing at the same time.
No, not really. Not when you got 6 people anyway across.
Okay.
Okay.
One last thing, which I'll raise before I let Jessica continue on the second part. And it came up actually as part of the discussion that Shari raised as part of the budget. Because we're talking about, we're probably going to have to change our signs, because our signs, refer to bikes and that. One of the things we might want to think about is what is going to be the cost to us to change our signs. We didn't budget for that.
Well, get the contractor to pay.
Yeah, I know, but that's something that we probably need to think about. I know it's probably not going to be much money, but once again, it's suddenly an expense that our communications marketing folks are going to have to bear if we have to change so many signs, depending on how many signs. It's something to think about. Okay, Jessica, I'll let you go on to the commercial world.
Alrighty, as Andy suggested, I'm gonna move on to the commercial side, and then I can circle back and answer a lot of these questions since they all apply to both. So as was stated by Cher, I kind of gave you a little bit of an introduction. Essentially, this fall, the Office of Transportation let us know that several e-scooter companies were starting to look at Columbia as a place that they wanted to sort of start operations. And we have several of the major landowners in the downtown area are particularly interested in this. Howard Hughes kind of leading the charge, but most of the other large landholders and organizations have signed on and are either working on agreements or already have agreements in place with that scooter company. In response to the interest, the Office of Transportation began looking at what legislation needed to go into effect, because a lot of communities, how they have ended up managing this kind of commercial operation and this influx of scooters into onto the community is by setting up a permit process. And so they wanted legislation that allows them to set up this permit process, which provides them a lot more tools for managing the program, for vetting the commercial companies they allow, for limiting operations and putting certain conditions on those operations. We actually provided written testimony in support of that legislation because it is a best practice to have a permit system for managing these. One of the kind of finer details of that was that because CA's pathway network is so integral to most of Columbia's transportation network, the Office of Transportation and the County Council actually put a requirement in that legislation that when a company goes to receive a permit, they have to already provide an affidavit from Columbia Association that we have given them permission to operate on our pathway system. That was one of the time-sensitive issues for tonight's discussion, because it looks like the county is going to solicit vendors for this permit process in June, and that a lot of them might start actually deploying their vehicles in July if, asterisk there is that if current conditions under the pandemic allows that. As you might know, Howard County has pulled the bike share from service because of health concerns. And I can go into details about what's in that permitting system and sort of the controls that are on it, because a lot of the questions and concerns that were raised in your earlier discussion are being managed by the Office of Transportation as part of their management of this commercial company. There's a lot more restrictions on what those vehicles have to have on them and monitoring them that the Office of Transportation will be heading up. I can dive into those questions. I can pause for questions. How would you like to proceed?
Why don't you try interesting questions? Yes.
Sure.
I'd like to ask my question at some point.
Jessica, you want to answer the questions you have already, and then we'll.
However you guys want to operate, I can move forward. So in terms of not when it comes to private scooters, because enforcement's a little bit more difficult, either the police service or any CA staff who happen to see an unsafe condition would be responsible for private enforcement. But in terms of the commercial e-scooters, the enforcement factor comes from the Office of Transportation, who will be actively enforcing it with their personnel. But then also there's more restrictions that the commercial company has that they can put on the vehicle itself. So they can maintain a geofence that's pretty good about limiting the area where a vehicle may travel. There's, about 100 to 200 yards difference. So it's not a fine detail solution, but they can keep the e-scooters from being able to begin a trip or end a trip in an area that's outside of a designated zone where we want them to go. They can limit the speeds on vehicles. All of the vehicles have to have registration and have to be uniquely identifiable, so that if there is a problem with a vehicle or with a user who's using a vehicle, if someone calls there are several lines, but a communication complaint and say, hey, vehicle number 11 just did this, the company will actually know where vehicle number 11 was and who had it rented out. And so they can actually restrict that user from using it again if there's a problem. So there's a lot more controls when it comes to the commercial vehicles. I can check if they have signaling on them. I know they have lights and they have to have other identification. I don't know if they have signals, but I can look into that. It looks like from a liability perspective, Sherry already kind of answered that in terms of what liability is on CA. It's clearly there's going to be a liability agreement between the user and the actual commercial company. And then our concern is to make sure that the company includes us and indemnifies us, except where we are negligent in a gross negligence kind of way, which is pretty standard. And then, as I said, scooters are going to be registered. Getting to the number of vehicles, the legislation says essentially that there will be no less than 100 and no more than 200 vehicles. So we know there will be between 100 and 200 scooters spread out throughout the entire Columbia area. There are 3 primary zones where they are supposed to be operating and where operations are supposed to be limited based on what the Office of Transportation is monitoring, and that is primarily in the downtown area, crossing over the bridge on 29 to go to the Oakland Mills area, because we wanted to make sure that our eastern communities had the same access to this transportation opportunity. And then the gateway is its own little loop, mostly to service, workers who want to get around to a lunch venue. So those are the kind of 3 zones that they're operating in. Helmets in Howard County, just answering this real quick, is the only restriction on helmets that exists in Howard County is that bicyclists and e-scooter users under 16 are required to wear helmets. Adults are not required to wear helmets. So the county's permitting system essentially requires the commercial operator to do both education for learning how to use e-scooters, safety requirements, but also incentive programs to encourage the use of helmets, and to have, to kind of do helmet giveaways to try to encourage users to use them. Nancy, I think you asked what is a low-speed scooter. By Maryland code, it's any vehicle that travels less than 20 miles an hour. Howard County has restricted the speed limit to 15 miles an hour, and we're looking at areas that we would want to restrict it even more than that, and what's safe. And we're trying to balance the difference between what is safe for pedestrians who might encounter these vehicles and what is safe for the actual vehicle users. I think we all talked a little bit. If you go too slow on a bicycle, you're more likely to topple over. So what's the perfect balance line for speed there? As I said, the company's going to have to do educational programming. Their bicyclists are going to have educational program written on the actual vehicles themselves, and then they have to do events to try to teach people in the community how to use them. And then I did want to go back to Jenny's comment about, why would we want to support these, and kind of emphasize one of the reasons that staff is urging the approval of these changes in policy is that when you try to get people out of their vehicles, the number one issue that people face for using public transit is the last mile issue. And it's that they can get on bus services or bicyclists to get to certain areas, but there's always this smaller little gap in their commute that prevents them from using that system. And e-scooters are really uniquely designed to handle the kind of last mile issue, because they're really designed for short trips, and they don't require a kind of a bigger deal. Like, the way I describe this is, imagine a woman who's wearing heels and a skirt and got her hair done and she's going to work. She's not going to jump on a bike share bicycle to grab that last mile between the bus and her office, but she might take an e-scooter to make it 1/4 of a mile, a little bit away. So it's really that kind of user that's being targeted. In Columbia in particular, we are a little bit more spread out because of our suburban development. So this is really a good transportation option for getting college students from the university to downtown, and then getting people around downtown where it might not be a comfortable trip mile to walk from MFLAPS all the way down to the fountain to go around. You might not do that trip on a person, even though it's not that far of a walk, but really people kind of consider 1/4 a mile the limit to what they will comfortably walk all the time. So this is really small trips. Alan, that's all I had. I know you had a question again.
Yeah, a couple. First of all, it sounds like you're saying that a guy who just had his hair done and was in high heels might want to get on a scooter. Anyway, just to clarify something, what you just said, you were just talking about the commercial scooters being limited to those 3 districts.
Yes.
Does that mean that if somebody rented a scooter in downtown, I'm liable not to see them on the pathway at the end of Woodell's Way in Hobbit's Glen here and Harper's Choice? Because their scooter wouldn't be allowed to go that far?
The way it's designed to operate is that someone can end their trip in Wolfdale's Range. So if they pick it up in downtown and they take the Cross Columbia Trail over to Cedar Lane and then head up to Harper's Choice, they can continue to operate their vehicle, but no one will be able to pick up that vehicle and start a trip from Harper's Choice. So the company will have to come around and pick up the vehicle and relocate it to the central area.
Okay. Thank you. Which of course raises one of the questions with issues with these. The biggest issue, I don't spend a lot of time in cities, but when I'm walking around DC or Baltimore, it's that people leave these things all over the place, and almost like feels like they're deliberately leaving them to block pedestrian access. And so I guess like getting a little concerned that our pathways are going to end up seeing, could end up seeing these scooters littering the pathway where people are trying to walk, and we have sometimes disabled people trying to walk on them, and that could be an issue. So related to that, I guess, and you answered this a lot, and I appreciate that you've been thinking about these things. I'm hoping you all will use that affidavit process vigorously, and will make sure that any concessions you feel are reasonable, even if they're a little bit onerous for the provider, will be met. Whether it's education, whether it's how long they can leave a scooter lying there before they're required to go pick it up, whatever it is. I'm sure there are things I haven't even thought about. That we make sure that we don't give that affidavit until we are 110% sure that we've gotten what we can out of it.
I'd like to add to that. I agree with what Alan has said, and I have seen things on these in California where the scooters are left all over the place. Not only are they a hazard, but they're an eyesore. So we need to find some way to make sure that this is not going to become the case here.
And I can address that a little bit. One of the benefits we have right now is that the company that wants to join us, Spin, while they do have a system of basically wanting to encourage people to pick up the scooter where it's convenient for them and drop it off at the destination that they are actually seeking to go to, they do have a model of providing docking stations. And their agreement with Howard Hughes is going to provide a series of those throughout the downtown area. It both charges the vehicles, but it also provides people a very clear place of where to park their vehicles. Absolutely agree with you. It is a national concern for everyone, the clutter issue with this. I mean, every community that has seen these scooters come in has been dealing with that. Some of the solutions are as basic as providing visible, frequent areas where you say, please park here, and kind of training the public to park in it, because every member of the public at some point has tripped on one of these. And so there's a matter of wanting to ensure that the community guidelines and how we treat this new vehicle is something that we sort of indoctrinate into people to have, best practices. As far as pickup goes, the company, they will have a name on a call number on the scooters for calling the company. They are required to come pick up a scooter that has been errantly laid within 2 hours of that call being made. And we, in our preliminary discussions with them, have also said, because our staff is always on our trails, if we encounter an unsafe clutter condition, we're going to pick up that scooter and remove it from that situation so that it's not an issue. And we've basically been very strict about writing that in and saying, you can come get your vehicles from us, but we're not going to just leave them out causing a hazard.
Well, and the only thing I would want you to add to that is there be a consequence for the provider, that they don't just get to say that the public will call and as long as we come within our 2-hour window, we're fine. But if they don't, what's the penalty? If we find it's onerous, is there a renewal process that we can say we revoke our affidavit because the original terms, they're making the money on it. Yeah, exactly.
And I will say that the CA's license agreement that we are currently negotiating, as well as the county permit process, can be ended at any time. So it's written in a way that if there's just too much headache or there's too many problems, that we can't end it. But it's also designed to also end after a year, so that if there's things that we learn in the meantime, we can implement them with a new agreement. Also saying that those agreements will also allow for changing as needed in real time.
Jessica, yeah. Can I just ask the bridge to Oakland Mills, how wide is that path?
I think it's 10 feet. I would have to double check that, but I believe it is 10 feet.
Okay, because when that was redone, I mean, it was just basically a covering that was put over it. It seems pretty tight to me if you've got two vehicles going in opposite directions. So I think that would be worthwhile checking.
Yeah, I will say, I know it is a minimum of 10 feet. I don't know if it's 12 feet. That's why I was hedging on that one. But 10 feet is sort of the minimum pathway standard that we currently have for the operation of vehicles.
Okay, thanks.
Dick, did you?
No, I agree with Alan. It looks inevitable that we're going to have to put up with these scooters, and we're going to have to trust Jessica to make sure that she really tightens those rules when in the permitting process to make sure that we don't run into any problems, and when we identify problems, we can get them corrected quickly.
Yeah, Andy?
Yes.
Yeah,
Jenny.
Jessica, fantastic job of presenting. One other thing, I would start keeping track of how many scooters we wind up picking up or our open space staff wind up picking up. And if it really amounts to a service we're providing for the company and they don't have to then pick them up, I'd start charging them.
Exactly.
That's down the road.
Okay, anything else?
I'm just trying to make money for CA.
Yeah, I'd like a clarification if I could, Jessica. I believe you said something about that there'd be a rush of companies coming in or something like that.
We'd had some interest. Spin is the only one that's currently in negotiations, and the county's permit system limits it to 2 operators. So essentially what's going to happen is the county's going to put out kind of a notice that we are taking permit applications for this, and it's going to be a first come, first serve, and then they're going to vet those companies and decide if they're able to meet all the requirements and conditions of our permitting system. So we're going to have no more than 200 vehicles and no more than 2 vendors to deal with.
Yeah, but that's just the commercial side. What about we have no idea when it comes to the private ownership?
Yeah, and I think the private ownership is going to be harder to judge, and it's really about community education. In the same way that we've educated people to call out on your left and to pass on the left when you're passing with a bicycle, we're going to have to do that same kind of educational programming for this user to make sure that we have good practices. And what we can also do within our office is continue to look at what other communities are doing to educate their populace and to try to manage this kind of interaction between these users.
But Jessica, you assume that if it's a private owner, they're not going to be just leaving their scooter where somebody can trip over it.
I doubt they will. I think that they're more likely to park it in bicycles. One of the other things
and
about,
lock it up. Right.
Yeah. Another thing just about all these vehicles is that they're allowed to park in bicycle parking spaces. So they're going to probably want to park in them a lot of times if they're a private user.
Okay, anything else? I have one last comment. When you're doing the negotiations, particularly talk about the speed, can you give particular consideration to the lakefront area? 15 miles, all I keep thinking, I understand our pass, okay, but the lakefront plaza has a tendency to get a wide number of people with a wide number of activities. And I think if there's any place that we should slow them down, it's the plaza area. So that might be one thing to think about, that enforce the lowest speed possible there.
Yeah, we're actually, in our negotiations, we've already identified the plaza as an area we do not want these scooters to operate, period. So that would be something we'd actually try to geofence out and put up some signage in terms of that, and a cognizant of the budget and the signage issue. It's the same place we don't allow bicyclists to operate with there. I think anyone who's been down there knows that bicycles still go through there. So it's really about education. And when it comes to the lakefront, that is where we are negotiating a lower speed. I think right now what we're actually wanting to do is to get the vehicles out on as a demo and actually test them and see speeds, because rather than arbitrarily picking a number based on what other communities have done, we actually want to see how do these operate in our facilities on our locations and what is actually safe.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. And from what I'm hearing from the board and everything, go write the policies and the contract, and you've heard all our comments. Right, board?
Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. Next item is the update on the Howard County General Plan update.
Yep.
So, Kristen, welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks for staying with us.
Always a entertaining discussion. You should have all received in your package for tonight's meeting a document put out by Howard County as related to their general plan. And I just wanted to give you some background information on that. Every 10 years, legislation requires that the county general plan be updated. This is in an effort to keep it current and relevant as times change. The first legislative step in the process is that the planning board is required to prepare guidelines for staff and advisory boards to follow as we go through this general plan process. And this ensures that a predetermined process is followed and that we kind of stick to the path that was laid out before us. The new general plan will be titled HOCO by Design, and the guidelines that I just mentioned were recommended by the planning board on May 7th. And the next step is that these guidelines will go to council. They'll be introduced on June 1st, and a public hearing will be held on June 15th. And then they expect a vote to happen sometime in July. Once those guidelines are adopted, the General Plan Advisory Committee will begin to meet, and we're hoping that by then some restrictions on meetings are loosened. The General Plan Advisory Committee has 18 members, and I will be there representing CA. The packet, the booklet that you got identifies a five phase process for the creation and adoption of the plan. Phase 1 is research and discovery, and that's where the consultants are in the process right now. They're doing a lot of background work and some internal work with DPZ. Phase 2 is when themes will be identified, and there will be a lot of community engagement. Depending on when meeting restrictions are loosened, a lot of that may have to become online or in smaller groups than Howard County originally imagined, but they still are focusing on community engagement. They'll talk about things like quality of life, demographics, fiscal impact, and that sort of thing. Phase 3 is scenario planning, and that's where forecasting happens. So based on the desires that were identified in phase 2 in community engagement, the consultants will help the county understand, okay, if we do A, then B will happen. But if we do C, then D will happen. So it kind of helps predict what different changes to policy and such, what will result from that type of change. Phase 4 is probably what you're most interested in. This is when it's called the framework phase. And this looks at the impact of things like infrastructure, land use map, policy decisions. And this is the phase when the Newtown framework design charrettes will take place. That's expected to happen in 2021. And DPZ, I was in contact with them this week, and they remain optimistic that by the time 2021 rolls around and the Newtown discussions happen, that we hope that we can have in-person meetings by that point in time. The Newtown focus will be to develop a vision for Newtown with emphasis on village centers, on commercial corridors, and the gateway. Downtown won't be affected, and this phase does not address zoning. It's really visioning. And then phase 5 is the final document. They hope to have that completed by the end of 2021, but as with everything nowadays, that schedule will be always up for reevaluation until we get, until COVID-19 is behind us. So, as I said, I am on the advisory committee, but because of COVID, we have not yet met, and we're hoping that somewhat concurrently with the adoption, with the official adoption of those guidelines, that maybe we can start to meet within the next 2 months or so.
Thanks, Kristen. Any questions?
So may I?
Sure, Renee?
Yeah, so Kristen, I believe it was you. I listened to the county meeting about the Starbucks. And I believe it was you that presented CA's position. Is that true?
Yep.
I have to compliment you. You were well prepared. You were concise. Your presentation was focused. And I want to thank you I think you gave our point of view perfectly. So I just want to compliment you on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Jenny?
Well, this is going to take forever, so.
Yeah. Jenny, did you have anything?
No.
Anyone?
Yeah, quick question.
Hi.
Yeah. Where can we find the names of the other members that are on this advisory committee?
You know, that's an interesting question because I'm not actually sure who they are, but I will be happy to reach out to Planning and Zoning and ask them if that's a list that can be released. And if so, I'm happy to share it with you.
Yeah, I didn't see the list of names, and usually that's something that the county does in those documents. And also, are you just aware, are there any village board members that have been part of this organization?
To my knowledge, I am the single representative of CA, and when I say CA in that context, I mean the villages and the Columbia Association collectively.
Wow, no pressure.
Hold on. Kevin McAlilly is the chair of the Wild Lake Village Board. He's also on the planning board.
Well, that is correct. I'm not sure that he's on the advisory committee. Once I get that list, we'll know. Once I get that list, we'll get a better idea of who's involved.
Okay, thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, actually, I do have a question. Kristen, are there going to be any smaller advisory committees on specific topics? Or is it too early to determine
It's really hard for me to answer that considering we haven't even had our introductory meeting yet.
Okay.
You know, typically with advisory type committees, when there is a specific topic, you might break into little subgroups, but I really can't, that's just what I've experienced in other advisory committees. I really can't speak directly to this one, but as soon as I have all that information, I'll share it with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kristen?
Yeah.
Who is actually heading this up on the county level? I know I mean technically planning and zoning, but who's the point person?
Actually, they just hired somebody, and let me look at my email here to get her name correctly. Amy Gowan is now the director of planning and zoning, and they just hired a new deputy named Mary Kendall. And she is going to be the representative from planning and zoning who is going to be coordinating, and, you know, she'll be my main contact person over at planning and zoning going forward. And I just found out about her on Friday, and we have now been introduced virtually, but I look forward to meeting her in person as soon as we're allowed to.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Dick?
Yes. Kristen, this is a big assignment, and I'm confident you're going to do a great job with it. This is probably one of the most important things for Columbia that's on the horizon. So good luck and best wishes. It's going to be quite a project.
I think it's going to be fun, though.
Oh, I think so, too. I think so.
Andy?
Yes, Milton?
Yeah, Kristen, will you just quickly update the board that we're moving forward on the to come up with a consultant to work with the board in an SLT?
Yes. As the board, I'm sure, remembers, the Columbia Association has decided to bring on a consultant to give the board some guidance and some to kind of facilitate some conversations about Newtown zoning and how our vision for the future of Columbia, how that intersects with zoning and planning and all that sort of thing, in an effort to help us best provide useful feedback and suggestions to the county as they go through the general plan rewrite and later down the road a zoning rewrite. So just about a week and a half ago, I think, we did select the team that is going to be engaging with you all. It's May and Reichel, and they have that's the name of the lead consultant. However, they've brought together a national team of experts, from Boston to California, who have really vast experience in master plan communities, and both original types like Columbia and some newer ones. So hopefully they can give us some insight as to how we can take the community that we love and take it into the next generation. It looks like, unfortunately, some of those meetings, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but different than we originally imagined. Some of those meetings will have to happen virtually, because we don't want to get too far off of our timeline and the county's timeline in terms of, as I mentioned, the Newtown aspect and the Newtown charrettes for this general plan are going to be happening in 2021. And we want to have gone through our process with our consultant prior to that, so that we've already established our vision and we can express that in a good way to Howard County. So we don't want to delay our process so that it won't, so that we can stay on track with the county. But we have selected a team. I believe they're going through the the contract process right now with our purchasing department.
Okay, that's good news.
Okay.
I'd like to get in, Andy.
Yeah.
Denny and then Alan.
Yeah. Okay. Kristen, I really appreciate what you're doing there, because I think we've been tired of reacting, and we want to be proactive. And that's the whole intent of this process, is that we have a chance to really think about what we want and not just react to what the county is or their consultants are planning. So this is great. Thank you.
Yeah. And the county knows that we're doing this and that we are, making an effort to come to their table with our thoughts fleshed out and as a partner.
Yeah, it's a positive process. And I know, Milton, you've talked to Amy before about this a year ago, at least. So it is a positive process. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alan?
And I just want to say, I do believe in positive processes, and you use words like useful information and express in a good way our concerns. I'd like us not to shy. It's in our goals for the strategic plan. I'd like us not to shy away from the word advocacy, and that we're going to advocate for what we want. And that's an important word and an important stance that some of us have had concerns in the past that, again, despite the best intentions, etc., CA has sometimes ended up being more sort of planning department too. It's like, does this match the criteria, rather than advocating fully in a full-throated way for Columbia and the vision and values. So I want to put in a good word for the word advocacy.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Kristen. Appreciate your staying with us and giving us the update, and good luck.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Next, we're going to move on. Board votes. So my first thing is, I'd like a motion to waive the 3 reading rule so we can consider motions for our budget.
So moved. This is Renee.
Renee moved, and is there a second?
Second, Nancy.
Nancy seconded. Is there any opposition?
Well, I'd like somebody to make the case for why we shouldn't just wait till the next meeting to do this, or have a special meeting in a week or something.
Well,
sure.
Why we shouldn't have the three reading rule? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Alan?
why we should keep the 3 reading rule and just maybe schedule a special meeting or something so that we have some time to think about this.
So can let me just say this. This is CA is in a financial situation that requires, from my perspective, requires us to morally act in a quick manner to shore up our finances. I'm trying to be diplomatic here. Does that, you understand what I'm saying, Alan? This is not something I would, if this was last year, I would say we can have public hearings, we can go to the villages. I advocate that we drag out things, that we bring in all the stakeholders, but this is a very tenuous situation that is going to require us to move rather rapidly and have to make choices that are, to me, gut-wrenching. So that's why I'm willing to waive the 3-vote rule. Now, do I like it? No. I don't like it at all. But I don't know that I have a choice.
Andy?
Thank you.
Okay, Jenny, and then Shari.
Okay, thanks. I don't think voting yes on waiving the 3 reading means we definitely are going to take a position tonight on the second part, which is a vote on the actual proposal. It doesn't prohibit us from having what you're talking about, a meeting next week, et cetera. It just would allow us to then vote on it, if I understand this, vote on it the second Thursday of the month, as opposed to waiting for the fourth Thursday of the month. Is that correct, Andy? Or
yeah, if we can waive the 3-meeting rule. I mean, if we don't waive the 3-meeting rule, even when we decide we want to vote, we need 3 meetings, and
right.
We basically have to call several meetings in order to get that done. Ari, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of reasons, some of us have not been able to talk to our village boards. Our village boards this was something that was introduced very quickly. This is something where the board did not get much advance notice with this. A lot of numbers, a lot of things to look at, and there may be things that we haven't really thought about. So I think getting a little space and time to talk to the villages about something that's going to be very definitely affecting them very strongly in terms of planning for the future is important. As long as we're not going to vote on this tonight, then that gives us the ability to quickly go back to our village board associations and talk to them and make sure it puts a little speed under all of us to do that.
May I?
Yeah, Renee.
Okay, so Shari, I agree with you probably 85 to 90% of the way. By waiving the 3-meeting rule right this second, I think there's some motions that need to be made to scoot this process along and to get the villages involved and to do some other things financially that don't involve approving this budget tonight. One of them, pardon?
Before you get into specifics, I'm confused. Would a vote, I mean, right now we're talking about whether to waive the three reading rule. Does that mean we could vote on the whole budget tonight, or are we saying this would be meeting 1 and we'd still need meeting 2?
No.
We could vote on it tonight, but that's not my intent.
It's also not my intent.
Then we can vote whatever we feel comfortable to vote.
Yeah, technically, but I think what some of us are saying is we do need more time. It's just it wouldn't need as many meetings to be able to finally vote. You could get a vote the second Thursday of the month.
Right.
Okay.
But still do what Sherry's talking about, and everybody else I think wants this to give time.
I'm just going to call the vote on just waiving the 3 reading rules, because we're kind of getting off into things.
Yeah.
Well, I want to propose an amendment then that we change it to a 2-meeting rule for this purpose.
Okay, I accept that. But Alan, understand that that means that we can't bring up any motions tonight to do things to prepare for the next meeting.
No, for me, it just means we can't vote on the budget. We could waive the 3-meeting rule and all kinds of other things.
Okay, so let's waive the 3-meeting rule for amendments.
For preparations,
preparation, items for preparation for the budget, but not on the actual vote for the budget. We'll make that a 2-meeting rule. How's that?
To me, I'd support that.
Okay.
But I'm not your second.
I would support that too. If you need a second to that.
I do.
Nancy already seconded.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Dick, you can't second it.
I'll third it.
All right, there you go.
What is the amendment?
What is the amendment?
The amendment is that. Go ahead,
Alan.
Well, is that we waive the turn the 3-meeting rule into a 2-meeting rule for the overall vote on the budget, but that we waive the 3-meeting rule for any preparatory actions leading to a vote on the budget.
Did everybody hear that?
No, say it again, please.
That we turn the 3-meeting rule into a 2-meeting rule for the overall budget, and that we waive the 3-meeting rule for any preparatory actions that need to be taken to prepare us to vote at the next meeting on the budget.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. I'll take that though is to say that we will vote on the budget
next week.
Whenever,
the
right.
Next opportunity.
The next opportunity, right?
Right.
Might be a special meeting.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All those in favor? Is there anybody opposed to that? That's okay. Unanimous. All right. Let's go on.
Okay. So may I say something then?
Sure.
Okay. So what I would like to do is to move that we hold a closed meeting, budget meeting, no later than next Thursday to discuss the personnel implications of the proposed budget. And that comes down to the line items which Susan has on her proposed budget, referencing the elimination of programs, et cetera, so that we can have a program specific or whatever it is specific idea of what we're voting on, program by program. I think that's important that for me as a board member and some of the other folks that I've talked to, that we're not just voting on a number, we're voting to eliminate a certain program or to keep a certain program. And I want all the board members to know exactly what we're cutting. And that can only happen because of the personnel issues in a closed meeting. So that's my motion, that we have that meeting next week.
I second that.
I guess if we're talking FTEs, if you will, full-time equivalent, personnel numbers, we're not talking about personnel, individuals. I'm not clear why it needs to be a closed meeting.
Yes.
Well, the reason is, Alan, that what was explained to me is that if we said we're going to close the widget division in a public meeting, then those folks would know that they're going to be permanently laid off prior to being told, and that's not really appropriate. So that's a discussion we need to have in private about the personnel implications, and it's allowed by law.
I don't think that should even be said out loud in this meeting, frankly. I think we're kind of overstepping here. If you know things that I, for example, or other board members are not aware of regarding staff, and then you're bringing it up at an open meeting, I think it's really not appropriate. You're just talking about 7 people that you are aware of that are going to be laid off. Did I mishear you?
That was just a fake example. That was just
That's a fake example. I talked about a widget company.
Well, Okay.
Unless you know about our widget
I think
division.
you got to be careful with what
Yeah,
you're
I'm
doing.
talking about the
no
widget
secret.
division, meaning the group that doesn't exist.
Well, let's just go with, we'll have a closed meeting next week, okay? By next Thursday.
Okay.
All right. Is
I
there any?
think your reasoning makes sense to me. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it.
All right. We'll have the closed meeting. That was unanimous.
Okay. Then I would like to make a motion as a first reading that we freeze the capital budget until further notice. Well, there you go.
Well, we already cut the capital budget.
We need to freeze it until we figure out the operating budget and what's available to spend. Okay, I can't.
Are you aware of any implications of that, though? I mean, that's a
right. If we don't, I don't want to get into the budget implications today.
There may be implications in freezing it, though. That's what I'm saying.
I understand, and I don't want. I can't have that conversation in public.
Well, but I think we can say that at least Susan is always letting us know that any capital budget always has operating budget implications. That there's always a connection between the two. So
that's correct.
I hear that.
Right, and what I'm saying is, until we straighten out one, I don't think we should be out spending money on the other. And it may be that in 2 weeks we're good with that budget, but today there are implications.
So here's my difficulty. We've already, one, cut the budget, two, and we've reduced, and three, we basically have staff
who's
requiring, somebody has a...
Jess, your microphone's not muted.
Sorry, I'm having...
Andy's gone mute.
You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, so we've already, one, cut the budget back.
That's correct.
Two, put a halt to a number of capital projects we were ongoing, and we told staff, that all the major projects have to be approved by Susan. They have to go through a review.
I agree.
And the last part is, some of the stuff in there is critical. Because if you remember, I mean, it's not just the large capital projects. There's that $5 million, $6 million line, which does all those other repairs, some of which are crucial. Like a water line breaking, and I would like that fixed. And so my thought is, I don't really want to freeze the capital budget, because I'm going to freeze those types of projects too. I would rather staff knows not to approve, anything beyond and to save as much money as possible. I'd rather give staff direction to minimize to the greatest extent possible, any expenditures that require cash right at the moment.
Andy, can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. I think we made it pretty clear when we were decreasing the capital budget that the only reason we approved the 8.5 million was for safety and health reasons. And the added condition that I believe Susan suggested is that the CFO really has to approve everything. So that's the safeguard in there. I think we've got to have some trust in staff and for the flexibility that if there is an emergency that is in the safety health area, they have to be able to act right away. They can't wait for us to unfreeze it. We can ask for reports on what's been spent. That would be one way of handling what you're talking about, Renee.
That's okay. I withdraw it. No problem.
No. I mean, it's just, it was a good point, but
that's fine. Okay. So can I go through my list?
Yes.
Okay. I've got a list. So the next thing that I have on my list is that I'm not as concerned with the amount of the Community Association annual charge share as I am about the communications between the villages, staff, and the board. And that what I would like to see is that we establish a working group with 3 staff members, 3 board members, 3 village managers to work through some of this stuff, to open up the lines of communication, to not circle our wagons, but to open our arms and to start developing a level of trust and honesty that right now the villages, I'm not saying anyone at CA is at fault, but the villages feel is lacking. So that's my next thing, that we establish a working group.
Okay, so what I heard, let me make sure I have this right. Your motion is that we do accept the reduction in the annual charge proposed, but that a working group be established to figure out how to implement it, among other things, right?
Right. And to go back to the villages, I think that what I heard tonight, I've heard over the last day or two, is that people feel like they didn't have a choice. And sometimes, and I think they do have a choice, but I think also because of the way it was presented, I mean, I've worked with our village manager, and when we sat down and started running numbers, can you survive on this? CA is going to make some gut-wrenching choices. You're going to have to do the same. But I think if it were done in a more give and take environment, it would be much more conducive to us getting the villages to understand the predicament that we're in. So all I'm asking is that we develop this working group. And I don't know if Jess is available or she wants to do it or she's too busy. But she obviously might be a good choice because she has that experience.
Yeah.
But that is the only purpose.
Andy, could I say something?
I'm here.
Well,
yes, I can help with that, depending on the time commitment, but yes, I would be very interested in participating in that. So
yeah. Thank you, Jess.
Andy,
all right.
Andy?
Also, Jess is seconding it.
What?
Yes, Jenny. Now you can ask your question.
Yeah, I think what at least I thought we were saying was we wanted to give this a little bit more time where staff could be talking to the villages, village managers, the village chairs, etc. in the next couple of days, since this is just a proposal. What I hear, Renee, you're saying is you are voting for it right now without allowing that to occur. Well, you said you approve it.
I can't approve it because
could I just finish?
Of course.
The motion as it reads is that we were approving it and then we're going to talk. My point is, I thought what we were saying is we're going to talk first, explain it to them, etc., listen to any concerns, and then then we'll be meeting ourselves on it.
I misstated that, Jenny. What I was trying to say was that I don't necessarily disagree with what's proposed. Right. What I want to do, though, is to create a working group. My motion is to create a working group that goes through this issue, as well as, where's my notes here? The HVAC systems that need to be updated or looked at according to Dennis, and reopening strategies for these buildings where we have village managers who don't know what that might entail.
Right, so and all that is going to take much longer.
Right. What I see is a working group that doesn't end in a week, but it's an ongoing process between 3 different parties, and that we go to the villages and say, look, here's the give and take that we want you to participate in.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Right.
And I'd like to get in as well. And I'd like to get in.
So would I when you have a chance, Alan. Or Andy.
Sorry,
okay.
Nancy.
All right. So the point I wanted to make is, and I guess I was hearing the same thing Ginny was, that because this all came up so soon, so quickly, and it's so dense, it makes some sense for us to be able to make sure that all of the village associations have this information and get an opportunity to look through it. And when we come back, we will then have more information that we can share and process together. And therefore, I would think that we would not vote on this tonight, since we just agreed to have a two reading rule. So we wouldn't be voting on this tonight. I do think the idea is very interesting of having a working group. And in effect, this would be a parallel process where we've got the board, we've got the village managers, we've got people working together, not so much concentrating on the short-term crisis, which the staff has been doing a fabulous job with. They've had so much that they've had to look at, manipulate, try to figure out. But to be looking at what is the future going to be? What is September going to look like? And I think we have to really focus on that and maybe use this group to set some priorities that are based on our values, so that one group is looking at the numbers and the other group is looking at what are our priorities in terms of what is the community asking us to do, what do we need to do right now, what do we need to do in the future, which is going to be very different. So I would support the working group idea.
That's all I want.
Dick.
I also support the idea of a working group. We do have to make some decisions on the budget. I think an interim step that we could take between now and when we have our meeting next week, our closed meeting next week, is I think it would be very helpful. I know Susan said that anytime a village has special circumstances, they should give her a call. I'd like to be a little more proactive on that. I would be happy to vote on this assessment share question if we knew that Susan had picked up the phone or Kristen and talked one-on-one with each of the village managers and just had a conversation, so that this doesn't seem like we're just throwing something at them, but have a conversation with them over their specific issues. And then when we get together next week, we could have talked with our villages and we'd be in a better position to move ahead with this.
Alan?
Yeah, I guess I am not in favor of putting the burden on Susan to do what I call a retail approach, which is call all 10 village managers. That doesn't feel efficient. I would be in favor of a working group as an ongoing, if you will, maintenance vehicle for the relationship, which is sort of what Shari was saying, for the relationship, for the decisions that have to be made about openings and whatever else, and to maintenance of the relationship between the CA and the villages. But I'm not in favor of the part of this motion that says we approve the reduction in the amount of money going to the villages. I would like to see, the working group is fine. What I'd like to see is a meeting of all village managers and CA staff, and if whatever board members wanted to come to that, to hash this out, to talk about it, to make the case that was made tonight by the staff, to say, hey, this is what's going on. These are our premises. This is the money. This is why we think this will work. Let's have a discussion, a negotiation, and make a joint decision. And then that information can come to us at our next meeting, and we can approve or disapprove, I suppose. But we'd be fools to disapprove it if the villages all had input and were signed on. This motion as it stands, I'm not in favor of linking the working group to the decision about this facility charge reduction.
Yeah, Andy?
Nancy? And then
Andy?
I got Jenny. Nancy?
Yeah, we're all over the map here, and so I'm going to throw in my little spiel once again about communication. And with Andy's help, I put something together today that is going to go out to those on my email list for Nancy's notes that will come out of Wild Lake. I think that generally we have blown sky high the concept of communication, and I'm incredibly disappointed. And as a result of our lack of communication, for those who might still be paying attention to what's going on tonight. We got how many emails from tennis players at Hobbits Glen because they had no idea what the reason was that Hobbits Glen wasn't opening up. So I think that we really, I know you're looking at the big picture, and we obviously have to, but we've gotten so far ahead of ourselves that we're not looking at the most important picture in my mind, which is communicating with the community. It is our job as board members to be communicating with our village boards so that they do understand what is going on financially with CA. But we are also not taking this message to our customers, who we hope will come back once everything opens up. But I think that we have not been respectful towards them because we have not communicated on a CA level. And I think it's a shame that I had to do it individually. I think Ginny sent something out. I don't know if anybody else did, but I think that this is absolutely critical. I've always screamed about it, and I do hope that we can still get something out soon from Columbia Association about what is going on with CA now, and why people can't use the pools, and why they can't use the Hobbits Glen tennis court. It's just mind-blowing to me that we've waited this long, almost 3 months, and no word has come out from CA.
Okay.
Jenny.
Yeah, I agree with some of the things you were saying there, Nancy. In terms of like Hobbits Glen, we should be sending something out right now, or a couple of months ago. But okay. I understand, Renee, where you're coming from. Normally, I am, as you know, a very big supporter of ad hoc committees, task force, limited period of time, very focused, and get the job done and report to the whole group. The practical application of this, I just don't see, because I cannot imagine 3 village managers being picked and the other managers not wanting to be in the room and having a say. I cannot imagine 3 CA board members or the rest of the board just allowing 3 CA board members to participate in a group and they're not involved, because this is an extremely, we keep saying the relationship with the village board and the village managers is crucial. So I really see it more of a process where we're all together. Hopefully it's like we did at Oakland, in the same room eventually. But this will be a long process, really dealing with FY 2022 budget. What are our, as you and I talked about today, what are our core services? We got to do this together. I don't think we can limit it to three people.
That's fine. I'm good. We can move on. I withdraw my motion.
But no, it's good. Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Nancy said. We have done a terrible job of communications. People out in the community just don't know what the financial situation is that we are in. Maybe we're keeping it secret for some reason or not, regarding getting a loan. But we have got to let the community know that there are reasons why we're not opening tennis courts, why we're not opening swimming pools, why we're in this budget crunch, why we're holding back money from the villages. We've got to get a release out. I think it would be good if a reporter from the Sun was invited to come talk with Milton, or whatever's needed to be done. But we have to let the community know what is going on. We need the transparency. We need the communications.
Thank you.
Andy, I'd like to get in the queue.
Alan? Nope, you're next.
Yeah. I move that we strike or put a bracket around the item for this facility charge reduction, and require that there be a meeting of all village managers, staff, and board, with whoever wants to come from those last 2 groups, or for all 3 groups, whoever wants to come, to make the case, and to give staff an opportunity to make the case, to hear from the villages, and at least make an attempt at a negotiated decision that the the group could come to say this is what makes sense.
I'll second that. This is Renee.
Can we have some discussions? Because
Oh,
I can tell you right now that village managers do not have the time, and we should not be volunteering them for a project that they are not involved in the discussion of. I really think that right now the short-term issue, right, is approving the budget and getting this facility charge thing addressed. I think if we go back to our villages, explain what happened in the meeting, make sure they understand the documents, and then ask them to contact Susan to discuss it and get questions answered, I think we can handle this. I don't think we need to all sit in a room. I mean, I think the timing would be really hard.
So, Jess,
are you making a
said
motion?
what I was going to say, which is
No, I'm not making a motion. There was a motion on the table to do that.
Are you amending it? Are you amending it to use that process?
No.
No.
What I'm going to argue against the motion, okay? Because we don't have the time. I'm sitting here hearing you people, and I'm thinking, do you understand that next week we are going to vote on this budget? Okay. A $4 million reduction. Now, I haven't heard anybody say we're going to get any more money. So the task before us is to reduce the budget by $4 million. Okay, and there is no time to sit down and say, oh, let's get everybody together and talk about it. Now, what you can do is you can make the broad cuts and then say, all right, we're going to cut this much, and you can then figure out how to apportion that, at a later date. But at least the overall budget is set. And so I'm not getting the sense that the board understands. There's a $4 million shortfall in income, and it's not going to go away if we kind of go and talk to the villages. It's not going to go away, if we want to kind of do a little more, one of our core values. We got $4 million. We have to figure out what we're going to cut. And we got to cut.
May I get
Andy, can I get in here?
Andy, I've asked to be on the table on the list as well.
Alan, Milton, and Shari.
Okay. First of all, it may be true for some village managers, but I'm looking at an email from my village manager that says, I strongly object to the village managers not having a voice at this table. And I know my village manager would love to. I've got the floor. And I know my village manager would love to be part of that. Now, that may not be true for all, and I understand that's a problem. So I'm willing to strike the second part of the amendment as long as we strike the reduction in the facilities charge to the villages until such time as the villages agree to a change in the management contract, and we find that this $150,000 elsewhere. If out of $4 million in cuts, we can't move around $150,000, we don't. No budgeting.
Milton?
Andy, basically for me, it comes down to we can't spend what we don't have. I came into this meeting this evening understanding that this was a proposal. It always has been a proposal before the board. And if the board said no to the $159,000, I know what I have to do. I have to go back to the CA and do what we have to do on the personnel side. And that's what it would do, because I don't have the money. You have in front of you what we're estimating our income to be. I can't spend more than that, and that's still an estimate. So if the board's position is that they do not want to consider this $159,000, I accept that. It's always been a board decision, and I'll do what I have to do next.
Shari, and then Renee. Shari, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think one of the problems, Milton, is that we have never been told, number one, what the deadline is. When you say that money needs to be there, I hear what you're talking about, but I don't understand what the deadline is. Is it last week? Is it next week? Is it the week after that? And And this is the documents that we were sent that compared proposal 2 to proposal 3. I don't know when you saw them, but I didn't see them until Tuesday. I didn't see them until Tuesday, and
Oh, Shari, you're muted. Shari, you're muted.
Okay, all right, sorry. I will try again. What I was saying is this aspect of what is the deadline? We don't know what.
We heard that part. The last part we heard was, I only saw this on Tuesday.
I only saw this on Tuesday. Yes, I only saw this on Tuesday. I have also been receiving emails from my village. I've had no opportunity to explain anything because we had our meeting last week. So we've got to take a breath here and wait for everybody to catch up. I know that you guys have been dealing with this so intensely. You're living and breathing it 24/7, but that's not true for the rest of the community. And we keep hearing that. So what I'm asking is if you can pause for a moment or tell us, does this need to be done by next week?
Susan, would you please respond?
Yeah, so it's May 28th, and you're talking about a budget that is in effect as of May 1, which is 27 days ago. So I would think the deadline is fairly clear.
Well, the 5% that you added on to the village boards, making it 13%, was just something that occurred a couple of days ago.
Jerry, we are doing this in real time. So we are now have done the third iteration of this budget since the end of March. So we can't move any faster. We worked over the holiday weekend. We have less than half our staff. We are not withholding information. You are going to have to speed up your thought process. You have to. You must. We're into the fiscal year now. We must move on.
Renee.
That doesn't give me the answer I was looking for.
I'm going to give you my answer. Okay. My answer is that I agree with Susan that we need to make a decision next Thursday. We cannot wait past that because we are already spending money that we know we do not have revenue to match.
That's not true. We're watching that, so we wouldn't do that.
Okay, but all right, then how long do you want us to take? I mean, I don't want to have this conversation in public. So I'm going to stop.
Susan, Andy?
Yes, Jenny?
Then I'd like to get in.
I guess two questions. One, can we make this the vote on the second Thursday or not? Of the month?
We already said to make it next week. We'd make the vote next week. We already voted on that.
Okay, so we're going to need an extra meeting then next week. Okay.
Yes.
All right. The second question is, Susan, the 159,000. If board members do not want to agree with your analysis, what would you? They can't answer this because it's personnel on that tonight. But I think for this closed meeting, you need to tell us which of our neighbors, relatives, etc., whatever, are going to be cut from the CA staff. You've already lost. I
have that.
Well, hey, Susan, you're saying you're ready. The reason why we have to do this in closed session, as you heard earlier, there are some programs that we're talking about. We will share. We're not going to get into naming individual team members.
Correct.
But
no.
The nature of some of these cuts when it comes to personnel, it makes it very difficult to have a public conversation.
No, I'm not asking for that.
I was going to say it tonight. I'm just saying that we had to be prepared for that possibility.
Yeah.
So we will have our closed meeting and we will talk about this as you all want, but it's all going to occur next week.
Andy, can I get your cue?
Yes, Dick.
I asked
Alan
as well.
is there too. Sorry, Alan was. Alan,
I
and
just
then
want to say, we have in the past put brackets around a particular line item with a contingency for something, and 157, 9,000, whatever it is, out of 4 million, if we can't make the decision by next week, isn't going to, I don't see how it's going to cause such great furor. And I do think we have a week, and this is important to the villages. It's important to the village managers, at least the ones I hear from, and they want a seat at the table. Some might even say a GD seat at the table. At least that's what I've heard from some people. And
Dick.
I think that's important.
Dick?
I think that Alan has a good point. We can bracket this particular piece of the budget, discuss it further next week. We could probably approve or disapprove the rest of the budget with this bracketed piece for further discussion. And as Milton said, if we don't approve this, he's going to have to find it someplace else. That's why he's our president. But right now, I think we can move ahead, but we may have to sidetrack this one particular budget item until later discussion.
All right. By later discussion, Dick, do you mean next week? This is where I'm not sure I'm following.
Yes, next week. Next week.
Okay, we've already agreed.
The motion says that's not what the motion says. The motion
that's
says
not what Al's motion is. Al's motion is
the
to
motion
take it
says pending a discussion with the village managers, board, and staff to come to an agreement about this.
Which is not
And
occurring.
we're talking about a small proportion, a small percentage of this overall budget.
But it's still a percentage, and if we don't do it next week, there's really no reason to even talk about it because we'll have to find the money somewhere else. I mean, that's the bottom line.
We're not going to spend all 4 million in.
It's not spending 4 million; it's cutting 4 million.
It's a 4 million reduction, Ellen. It's not. We're getting $4 million. You got
3,841,000 of that's already decided. That's the vast bulk of it.
Well,
but
if you agree with it, Alan, then we should just vote tonight on that. But I'm hearing the board wants to talk about it.
Well, here's I think the hang up seems to be this one item. And I would have no problem on voting on the rest of the recommendation, provided we bracket this one piece for further discussion next week, at which time we can make some decisions as to where we want to go on it.
That's not what I'm hearing from the rest of the board.
Well, ask the rest of the board.
wrong.
Ask the board if they'd be interested in doing that.
Well, I don't know what we're voting on because I don't know what programs we're cutting.
Yeah, I think that was Renee's original point about an hour ago. So can we move on or?
Well, I mean, sure, but we're going to
have a motion on the floor. If we're done discussing it, we can have a vote.
Alan's vote. And so my question for the board is, are we making the decision next week or not? I mean, because that's what I'm going up. Alan says, no, we don't make any decision on that amount of money, which means until we meet with everybody else, and that's not going to occur next week. I can tell you that right now. So Alan's motion, even though it sounds good, just means we're not cutting the $160,000 out. Okay, next week we're going to reduce the budget by $4 million, and if it isn't the 160 from the villages, it's 160,000 from somewhere else. So thinking, we're going to sit here and we're going to vote, it's like not going to happen.
Okay,
it's like we're going to make the decision.
Let me put it this way. I think that the problem that's holding things up is the way that this decision was announced to the villages and some of the blowback that we got because of the way it was communicated or failed to be communicated. So we have a few days before our next meeting next week for staff to talk to the village managers and bring them up to speed, not waiting for them to call in, but just to find out if there are issues, if there are problems, how they would deal with it. That's what I want. I want some communication between our staff and the villagers. That's all. And then we can vote on it.
So it sounds to me like everyone's kind of saying the same thing, that we have to vote on a budget next week and we have to make a decision about whether this change in the village's assessment share is going to happen. So I don't think it really matters, what happens between now and then. I think each of us can go to our village manager, have a conversation and say, what are the issues? What are the problems? And then come back and we can vote.
I could go
to
with
me,
that.
That's a divide and conquer kind of method, and it doesn't allow the villages to get together and share information and share ideas and come to a group buy-in consensus on.
We don't have time for kumbaya.
I know that.
I'm not talking about kumbaya.
I've spoken to multiple other village managers, so I'm with you, Jess. I think we vote next week.
Yeah. All right. Look, Alan's suggestion is that basically we strike the 160,000. So I'll take the vote. All those in favor.
Wait, whoa. That was not the amendment, Andy.
Alan, you're quibbling. You said until everybody in the world gets together and talks about it. And I'm saying the deadline is next week. The deadline.
No, I didn't say any of that. Andy. So please, if you're going to be the chair, you got to be fair and not just go by what your belief is. You're welcome to your own opinion, but not as chair.
Alan, what's your motion?
The motion was that we bracket the 150, the reduction in the facilities charge payment to the villages until such time as we have a meeting of the village managers and whoever from the board and staff can participate. And this is period. And to come to an agreement. And I would just bracket that I'd say let's schedule for Tuesday or maybe Wednesday.
Not happening.
You say that,
I
but it
will
could be
that
scheduled.
motion. So
It's
all
Nancy.
those in favor, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Janet?
Opposed.
Shari?
No.
Ginny?
No.
Ginny?
No.
Dick?
I'll vote yes.
Lynn?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Jess?
No.
Alan?
Yes.
Renee?
I'm thinking. I agree with Alan, but I'm going to vote. I'm going to abstain.
Abstain, okay. And Andy, no. All right, the motion fails. Okay, guys, we're getting real late. We're going to schedule the meeting next week. We're going to do the budget vote. Everybody understand?
Yes.
I'll work on getting it scheduled. All right.
I strongly recommend that each of you go back to your village manager. Sorry to talk out of turn, but I'm just telling you that that's what we have. That's what we have to work with. I strongly suggest you just make that call.
Right.
That's all.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I agree.
I agree. I thought that was our original intent, right?
I already did that.
Okay. Chair's remarks. Any questions? President's report. Any questions?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I had a question from my village manager, not so much about what's on the report, but they're wondering what's the status of the loans we've been pursuing.
The status of loans, who has been pursuing?
That CA is pursuing a line of credit and other loans. last they heard, we expected to get the answer at the end of April. It's now the end of May.
Right. Well, you were informed that that process was taking a lot longer, and it's still in negotiations. We haven't heard anything back from the bank this week.
Yeah, but I thought we were informed in a closed meeting, so I wasn't feeling like I could share the fullness of this.
Okay. Anything else? Inter Arbor Trust Report, any questions? All right. Tracking forms. There was nothing on the tracking forms. Proposed new topics. Anything anybody want to say?
Yeah. I
Yes,
did send something to be put on the tracking form to get a communication out to the community ASAP.
Right. Got that. Anything else?
I'd also like somewhere on the tracking form to be Renee's suggestion about the working group between villages and CA to facilitate that.
Village working group.
No. It's just
Anything else? Okay, talking points.
Andy, I'm going to do my best because I heard several motions. Here is what I believe the board approved. I believed that the board approved.
Oh, shoot.
Janet?
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion that you sit down with Andy and Milton and come up with those talking points and put them out tomorrow morning?
Renee, I tell you what, my shorthand is all over the place, and I really would appreciate a chance just to sit down with it and do my best and send it out for review to Andy and Milton and make sure that what I have is correct and that nothing is missing.
Not a problem, and it's late. It's
perfect.
That's what we'll do. We'll just work that out.
Thank you.
Thank you for trying, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
All right. So I want to thank all the board members for our meeting tonight. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. I want to thank all the staff for participating. And stay tuned because you'll get an email from me shortly about our meeting next week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Night.